Chapter 17. Noah had previously heard from Makarov that although Polyusia wasn't very famous, she was a very powerful person. When he heard Makarov's words, Noah had thought that Polyusia's strength was on par with Makarov, who was one of the 10 great Saint Magi. Now, Noah understood that when Makarov said that Polyusia was a very powerful person, he wasn't referring to Polyusia's strength, but Polyusia's healing abilities. Undoubtedly, although Noah's injuries couldn't be considered serious, they definitely weren't light either. However, Polyusia had only seen Noah once and said that he would recover in 3 days. After that, Noah really did recover in 3 days. After 3 days, when Noah removed the bandages on his body, his left shoulder and left arm that had been charred black by the lightning had completely recovered, leaving only a few hideous scars. Of course, if Polyusia had come to take care of Noah in these 3 days, there definitely wouldn't have been any scars left on Noah's body. Unfortunately, letting Polyusia, who hated humans, come to Fairy Tale in order to prevent Noah from growing scars, was something that even Makarov wouldn't be able to do. Noah didn't really care about the hideous scars that extended from his left shoulder to his entire left arm. After confirming that the injuries on his body had completely healed, he hesitated for a moment before wrapping his entire left arm in bandages to cover the hideous scars. Then, he immediately left the room. Fairy Tale was as noisy as ever. Seeing the first floor of the guild that was as noisy as a bar, Noah revealed a somewhat nostalgic expression. He couldn't help but smile as he walked into the sight of his companions in the guild. Noah. Gray, who was talking to someone at a wooden table, was startled when he saw Noah's figure. Then, he quickly trotted over and searched Noah's body. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine now," Noah said with a smile as he slapped away Gray's hand that was groping his body. "My injuries have completely healed." "Are you for real?" Gray continued to grope his way over, his eyes constantly sizing up Noah's body. "When you came back, you looked like you were about to die. It's only been 3 days. Are you really fully recovered?" "I wouldn't have come down if I hadn't fully recovered." Noah slapped away Gray's hand helplessly. "You know, Grandpa is surprisingly stubborn about this kind of thing. If it's not good, he won't allow me to go downstairs." "That's true." Gray didn't bother Noah anymore. He crossed his arms and clicked his tongue in wonder. "But I didn't expect you to be so seriously injured on your first mission. Didn't I tell you not to go? I know you're worried, but no one would have expected this kind of thing to happen. It's fine as long as you're fine." Noah was surprisingly open-minded and even advised Gray. "When you have a chance to go out to work, you have to be careful. Don't end up like me. You just went out to work before me. Why are you speaking as if you're my senior?" Gray pouted unhappily and then pointed to the side. "Compared to me, look over there." Noah looked in the direction that Gray was pointing at with some doubt, and he was surprised in the next moment. There, Alusha was sitting at the wooden table in her usual armor. Her red hair was still dazzling and her face was as stern as usual. The difference was that this time, Alusha wasn't alone in the corner of the guild. There were a few girls sitting at the wooden table where Alusha was sitting. They seemed to be chatting with Alusha and they seemed to be getting along quite well. Even Noah was at a loss when he saw the situation. What's going on? Noah clearly remembered that Alusha had always been unapproachable and didn't know how to interact with others. But now, what was going on with this scene? 3 days ago, after you guys came back, Alusha became more humane and didn't reject her companions from getting close to her. Gray asked curiously. Did something happen while you guys were out working? Otherwise, how could Alusha change so much? I'm not very sure. Noah scratched his cheek. He already had a plan in his mind, but he just smiled at Gray. Well, it's a good thing anyway, isn't it? Indeed, Alusha is not as annoying as before. However, I heard that when you guys were out working this time, Alusha seemed to have defeated the magic shooter of Phantom Lord. Gray said eagerly. If there's a chance, I'll challenge Alusha and see if Alusha is really that powerful. Hearing Gray's words, Noah opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but when he saw Gray's excited face, he knew that anything he said would be useless. To be honest, Noah felt that if Gray wanted to challenge Alusha, it would not be very optimistic. Not to mention that Gray's magic was still in the learning stage, it was definitely not a problem for him to use magic smoothly. However, it was still too early for him to use magic in battle. On the other hand, not only was Alusha's swordsmanship strong enough to defeat the magic shooters of the Phantom Lord branch in one fell swoop, but she was also very proficient in using the disguise spell. It was not something that Gray, who was still in the learning stage, could compare to. If Gray were to go against Alusha, Noah felt that it would be a miracle if he could hold on for even a minute. Just as Noah was feeling helpless about Gray's decision, not far away, Alusha also noticed Noah's side. At that moment, she hurriedly said something to the people at the same table, got up, and walked over to Noah's side. Seeing the scene of a valiant little girl in armor walking over, Noah chuckled. When Alusha arrived in front of him, he immediately spoke. Looks like you're finally starting to get familiar with this place. The main thing is that everyone is easy to get along with. Alusha nodded and asked with concern. Are your injuries all right now? As you can see, they're basically all healed. Noah moved his left arm, but his gaze was attracted by Alusha's eyes. Of course, this was not because Alusha was very charming, nor was it because Alusha had an extremely beautiful face and a pair of beautiful eyes. It was because Alusha's pair of eyes were exposed to the air. Yes. All of them. Originally, the medical eye patch on one of Alusha's eyes had disappeared, and a pair of eyes appeared intact in front of Noah. Naturally, it attracted Noah's attention. Your eyes? Noah asked cautiously. My eyes. Alusha's expression was complicated as she touched the eye that was originally wearing the medical eye patch. After a while, she shook her head. It's already gone, but the granny that the president brought back not long ago to treat you helped me take a look at my eyes at the president's request. I see. Noah understood. Artificial eyes. Alusha nodded. It seemed that she did not want to talk about her eyes, so she changed the topic seriously. I haven't thanked you for saving my life. Noah shrugged his shoulders. Just as he wanted to brush her off, his heart couldn't help but move. His gaze was burning as he looked at Alusha. If that's the case, there's something I want to ask of you. Can you come with me? No problem. Although she did not know what Noah wanted to ask of her, Alusha agreed readily. Thus, under Noah's lead, the two walked out of the guild together. Seeing Noah and Alusha leave as if there was no one around, Gray, who was standing at the side, was stunned. After a long time, he roared. Are you ignoring me? Chapter 18. In a forest not far from the fairy tale guild, Noah brought Alusha to the small river where he usually trained his magic control. Standing by the river bank, he took a deep breath. I haven't been here for a few days, this place is still the best. I didn't expect you to be hiding such a secret place. Alusha looked around and seemed to be quite satisfied with this place. The environment is quite beautiful, and it's quiet enough. It's perfect for training. Isn't it? Noah winked at Alusha. This is the place where I usually train my magic control. It's not bad. Alusha retracted her gaze and looked at Noah with a solemn expression. But, you brought me to this place where people usually don't come because it's not convenient for outsiders to know about your request, right? It's not that it's not convenient for outsiders to know. Noah shook his head and signaled Alusha not to be so serious. It's just that this place is more convenient for you to do what I want you to do. More convenient for me to do what you want me to do. Yes. Noah faced Elisha and looked directly at Elisha's incomparably cold eyes. I want to learn battle techniques from you. Learn battle techniques from me. Elisha, who had a solemn expression, was stunned on the spot. This was not Elisha's fault, but Noah's so-called request really surprised Elisha. I know you'll be surprised if I say this out of the blue. Noah laughed bitterly. But this is indeed what I want you to do. Seeing Noah's bitter smile, Elisha frowned. In her heart, she more or less understood Noah's thoughts. Obviously, the encounter with the Phantom Lord 3 days ago made Noah, who was unable to fight in that battle, want to become stronger. However, because Noah had too much magic in his body, and because he could not control it as he wished, even if Noah wanted to become stronger, he could not do so by learning magic. Therefore, naturally, he could only focus on training his own battle techniques. In this aspect, Elisha did have some experience, so it was not strange that Noah came looking for her. Of course, what Elisha was really strange was this seemingly ordinary matter itself. Why are you looking for me? Elisha asked straightforwardly. Maybe that day in the battle with the Phantom Lord, you saw that I defeated 3 magic shooters with 1 sword and thought that it was amazing, so you came looking for me. But there are so many powerful magic shooters in that fairy tale, shouldn't they be more suitable? Indeed, there are many powerful magic shooters in the fairy tale. Noah shrugged his shoulders. But you said that they are more suitable, that's where you are wrong. Elisha was slightly startled and did not understand what he meant. You also said that they are powerful magic shooters, so to be honest, just based on their own skills, I don't think that there are many of them who are better than you. Noah did not beat around the bush and directly said his thoughts. In addition, although they gather in the guild every day, they are also mature magic shooters and cannot stay in the guild all the time. From time to time, they need to go out to work. You, on the other hand, will not officially start work for the time being, so you have a lot of time to train. As of now, there is no one more suitable than you to teach me. Hearing this, Elisha felt that it was reasonable and could not help but admire Noah's analytical ability. It was not easy for an 11-year-old child to be able to do this. Moreover, Elisha did not forget that 3 days ago, in the battle with the Phantom Lord, it was this youth who stood in front of her, who was the same age as her, who had not even learned a single spell and had not even come into contact with magic, who stood up and fearlessly blocked a blow for her. At the same time, he also caught Mowgli off guard with a beautiful punch. No matter how one looked at it, an ordinary 11-year-old boy would not be able to do this. Therefore, Elisha actually admired Noah from the bottom of her heart. Unfortunately, Elisha still did not agree. To tell you the truth, although I do know some battle skills, it was not taught by any famous teacher, nor was it learned from anywhere else. It was all by myself. Elisha's face was tense as she stared at Noah. Of course, I can't guarantee that these skills will be outstanding. I can't even guarantee that they will be effective and useful. Even so, are you okay with it? Hearing Elisha's words, Noah did not show any signs of hesitation. Instead, he revealed a relaxed smile and said this. Hearing this, I want to learn from you even more. Elisha was not surprised at all and stood rooted to the ground. That day in the battle with the Phantom Lord, although I did not participate, I saw your moves clearly. You were able to instantly defeat 3 magic shooters from an official guild with a sword technique. Who can say that it is ineffective and useless? Noah looked straight at Elisha and said calmly. And since you were the one who figured out that sword technique, I can't find any reason not to learn from you. This. Elisha did not know whether to laugh or cry. What? Do you have a problem? Noah scratched his cheek. If there's something that's troubling you, then just ignore what I said. No, it's not like that. It's just that I didn't think that you would have such a high opinion of me. Elisha's expression also began to relax and she returned a smile. Since that's the case, don't regret it in the future." The 11-year-old boy and girl looked at each other and smiled. Very tacitly, they reached out their hands and held each other's hands tightly against the backdrop of the small river. Noah only bid farewell to Alusha on the first floor of the guild when the sky turned dark. He returned to his room, exhausted. Even Noah did not expect that after he had just asked Alusha for a favor, Alusha did not delay any longer and immediately pulled him to train. This was not a big deal. After all, Noah also wanted to master some combat skills as soon as possible. He was not someone who was used to slacking off. Otherwise, he would not have continuously trained his control of mana year after year. Noah was also happy to see that Alusha was so proactive. However, now, Noah felt that he was too naive. Alusha herself had said that her combat skills were all figured out by herself. No one taught her, and she did not learn from other places. Naturally, she did not know how to teach others. Therefore, the only teaching method that Alusha could think of was to personally fight. Therefore, Noah was also trained by Alusha for an entire day. It would be strange if he was not tired. Looks like I have to strengthen my body more. Otherwise, I won't be able to get used to this kind of training. Noah muttered to himself as he pushed open the door to his room. However, this push also caused Noah's footsteps to stop. This was because on the bed in Noah's room, there was something that did not belong to him. A sword. A knight's sword with a half-curved, slightly curved, long, and dazzling as ice. Next to this rather dazzling knight's sword was a piece of paper. There were only 2 words written on it: "Do your best." Looking at the extremely stable handwriting that was as loose as an old pine tree, Noah did not need to think to know who left it behind. After all, wasn't that old man the one who suggested that he obtained strength from other aspects? Noah could not help but feel a scorching warmth in his heart. He stepped forward and carefully lifted the gorgeous knight's sword that was lying in front of him. He felt the sharpness of the sword and the extraordinary aura on it, and muttered, "Thank you, grandfather." Chapter 19. Magnolia, forest riverbank. The sound of flowing water echoed clearly in the desolate forest. The sounds of birds, beasts, and insects also echoed in the surroundings. A gentle breeze blew past, stirring up green leaves and sand. Everything seemed so natural. Standing by the riverbank, Noah leisurely closed his eyes. Around his body, beads were suspended in the air, bobbing up and down. If one were to observe carefully, they would discover that the beads floating around Noah had a layer of faint light covering the outline of the beads. As the beads moved up and down, they were sometimes bright and sometimes dark. It was very mysterious. This scene lasted for an unknown period of time. Noah had been maintaining this state for an unknown period of time, causing the surroundings to be silent. Until a certain moment, the arrival of a figure finally broke the silence. After continuously walking for 3 months, Alusha had thoroughly familiarized herself with the road. When she came to the riverbank, she saw Noah standing in front of her with his eyes closed and beads floating around him. She couldn't help but smile. "You're still the same as before, much earlier than me," Noah, who had his eyes closed, gently curled his lips. With a thought, the beads floating around him floated to the ground as though they were being held by hands. When all the beads gently landed on the ground, Noah opened his eyes and turned around. "Can't help it. After all, you have to learn sword skills as soon as you arrive. If I don't do it earlier than you, I won't have the time to train my magic control." Although Noah had been training his sword skills with Alusha in this unknown secret base for the past 3 months in an attempt to gain some combat ability, Noah clearly knew where his true advantage lay. Magic power. The huge amount of magic power in his body that others couldn't reach was Noah's true strength. Naturally, it was impossible for Noah to give up his true strength in order to learn some swordsmanship techniques. Even if he had to train swordsmanship with Alusha every day, Noah would still take a lot of time to continue training his magic power control. Learning sword skills would allow Noah to gain a certain degree of combat ability. Learning magic, with Noah's terrifyingly strong magic power, allowed him to become a powerhouse that even Makarov felt would surpass sooner or later. Coupled with the fact that the mainstream of this world was magic, all these factors told Noah that he couldn't put the cart before the horse. Therefore, Noah was still very good at arranging time for various aspects of training. In the past 3 months, not only had Noah's control over his mana improved significantly, but his swordsmanship had also improved significantly. Being diligent is a good thing. As expected of you, unlike Gray who only knows how to duel with me all day. If you have this kind of time, you might as well use it to train. In these 3 months, they had spent at least 12 hours a day together and improved together. This had already made Noah and Alusha the two people in fairy tale who understood each other the best. Naturally, they were also very clear about each other's improvement in strength. Therefore, Alusha didn't waste any more words. She stretched out her hand and the light of magic power blossomed in her hand, turning into a knight's sword and falling into Alusha's hand. Then, it's time for us to start today's training. Noah nodded and squatted down to pick up a sheathed knight's sword from the ground while smiling at Alusha. It seems that in these 3 months, you've improved not only in sword skills, but also in equipment changing magic. The speed at which you changed your equipment just now was almost twice as fast as before. I've been using it every day for the past 3 months, of course I'll improve. Alusha pointed the knight's sword at Noah from afar. Her cold eyes began to rise with battle intent. Don't think that you're the only one who's improved other than your sword skills. Hearing Alusha's tit-for-tat words, Noah knew that Alusha was starting to get excited. He slowly withdrew his expression and put his hand on the hilt of his sword. Along with the clear sound of friction between the sword and the scabbard, Noah's right hand, which had the guild emblem of fairy tale on the back of his hand, pulled out the long sword that was as bright as ice and pointed the sharp sword tip at Alusha on the opposite side. Come! As soon as the voice fell, the two small figures facing each other disappeared at the same time. Clang! Almost at the same time, a loud and clear sound of steel clashing resounded in the middle of the field. A rather ferocious shockwave violently surged out, blowing away the rocks, dust, and fallen leaves within a few meters of the place where the sound of clashing resounded, clearing out a spacious and empty circle. Tightly holding the knight's sword in his hand, Noah raised his eyes and looked at the other knight's sword that was thrusting like a venomous snake. He took a light breath and swung the knight's sword in his hand. Ding! The tip of the incoming knight's sword hit the body of the knight's sword, but it was also heavily pressed back by the knight's sword. It was pressed into an extremely eye-catching and thrilling arc, and the tip of the sword almost reached Alusha's hand that was holding the sword hilt. As expected of a boy, your strength is not small. Suffering a small loss on the first contact, Alusha was not shocked but laughed instead. Her hand that was holding the sword tightened, and with a move, the knight's sword that was being pressed by Noah strangely turned. The sword tip created a burst of sparks on Noah's knight's sword. Then, it suddenly pierced out. Ha! Just as the knight's sword moved, Alusha let out a low shout. Suddenly, a burst of magic suddenly appeared on the sword. It was as if it turned into serpentine electric arcs, intersecting and flashing, creating a chi-chi sound. Seeing that Alusha actually directly used magic, Noah was shocked. Everyone in this world knew that magic was the fuel for using magic. Only people who had magic could use magic and fight. But in fact, other than being the fuel for using magic, to a certain extent, magic also had many other uses. Turning pure magic into power, some tools used magic as the source to work. Situations like this could be seen everywhere in this world. In addition, those who could use mana could also use pure mana to strengthen their own physical abilities to a certain extent. Alusha was like this now. Although using magic this way was definitely weaker than using the same amount of magic to use the same type of magic with the same strengthening effect, it was still better than nothing. At least, with the support of Alusha's magic, the natural disadvantage of men compared to women completely disappeared. In fact, in terms of strength, she even surpassed Noah. How despicable. Undoubtedly, you know that I can't use magic casually. Noah was a little embarrassed and angry as he retreated. He raised the knight's sword in his hand, and with a sharp gust of wind, he fiercely slashed at the long sword that was thrusting towards him. Clang! The knight's sword and the knight's sword collided in an instant. The powerful force acted on both of them at the same time. As a result, Noah took a step back again. It's not over yet. Looking at Noah, who held the knight's sword and involuntarily took a step back, Alusha let out a clear shout. She didn't have the slightest intention of holding back. The knight's sword once again thrusted out and heavily pierced the body of the knight's sword that Noah could only raise to block because of his retreat. Ding! After a clear sound, Noah only felt a vigorous force fiercely transmitted from the knight's sword in his hand. It turned into the most direct impact, shaking Noah's hand so much that he couldn't help but let go of the knight's sword in his hand. Ho-ho! The sharp knight's sword was directly shaken out of Noah's hand and spun in the air like a windmill. Gotcha! In the end, in a cracking sound, Noah's sword was stabbed into the ground not far away. Chapter 20. Gotcha! Along with a crisp cracking sound, Noah's knight's sword directly stabbed into the ground not far away. The sharp blade of the sword stirred up a lot of gravel. It wasn't hard to imagine what would happen if one were to be struck by such a sword. It's over just like that. Alusha's lips curled, and the knight's sword in her hand resolutely pierced forward. Her target was Noah's neck. Thinking about it, with Alusha's ability, she should be able to control and stop her sword when it was an inch away from Noah's throat. However, just when Alusha thought that the battle was over, Noah suddenly raised his head and waved his bandaged left hand. A black shadow immediately flashed and heavily collided with the tip of Alusha's knight's sword. Ding! In the next second, a loud collision sound rang between Noah and Alusha. Alusha was also stunned by this sudden situation. Until a force transmitted from the knight's sword in her hand, causing Alusha to involuntarily take a step back, only then did she understand what happened. In Noah's other hand, there was actually another weapon that could be used. Scabbard. The scabbard that Noah had been holding in his other hand all this time. Just now, Noah directly used the scabbard in his left hand as a sword against Alusha's knight's sword, neutralizing Alusha's sure kill attack, and also turning the tide of the battle. Looking at the astonished Alusha, Noah stomped on the ground and his figure flashed like lightning in front of Alusha. It's still too early to end it now. Under the gaze of Alusha's slightly narrowed eyes, Noah, who was tightly holding the scabbard, quickly borrowed the force and spun half a circle in the air, strangely drilling into Alusha's bosom. After pausing for a moment, the scabbard in his hand fiercely smashed towards Alusha's chest with a sharp sound that could almost tear through the air. Feeling the approaching force, even Alusha's face couldn't help but change, and magic power suddenly rose from her body. Change equipment. A circle of dazzling silver light bloomed in front of Alusha. That was the unique light of the equipment change magic. When the light dissipated, in front of Alusha, a small silver shield the size of a basin appeared out of nowhere. Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but be startled. Shield. Noah had already seen Alusha's equipment change magic many times in these 3 months. He had also seen all kinds of weapons that Alusha had hidden away, but this was the first time he saw Alusha use a shield. Did this mean that the battle situation for Alusha was so urgent that she had no choice but to use a shield? When this thought arose in his mind, Noah's movements didn't have the slightest hesitation. The force of the scabbard in his hand didn't decrease, but instead increased, and heavily smashed onto the silver shield. Bang! The The sound of the impact was like an invisible ripple of force, spreading out from between Noah and Alusha. Alusha only felt that although the force that smashed onto the shield in front of her didn't injure her, the force of the impact was still there. It made Alusha, who was originally in the process of retreating, directly break her posture, and continuously retreat. After retreating nearly 20 steps, Alusha finally stabilized her body. However, at this time, Alusha didn't move anymore. Because, in front of Alusha, a figure had already appeared there. The tip of the scabbard in his hand stopped about an inch away from Alusha's throat, pointing at Alusha's throat. This scene, in the second when the knight's sword in Noah's hand was knocked away, also appeared in Alusha's imagination. Unfortunately, at that time, the figure in Alusha's imagination should have been changed. This is the real end. Noah laughed as the tip of the scabbard pointed at Alusha's throat, who hadn't completely reacted yet. Alusha, you underestimated your opponent. Alusha indeed underestimated her opponent. It wasn't that Alusha had been holding back, but, after knocking away the weapon in Noah's hand, Alusha thought that she had won, and naturally became a little careless. She didn't expect that Noah would actually use the scabbard to counterattack, and was caught off guard. If it wasn't because of this, with Alusha's reflexes in battle, this battle definitely wouldn't have ended so quickly, and Noah wouldn't have won so easily. Looking at the scabbard that stopped in front of her throat, Alusha helplessly lowered her arm, and a look of dissatisfaction appeared on her delicate face. You actually used the scabbard to counterattack, how cunning. Same here. Noah rolled his eyes, removed the scabbard, and walked towards his knight's sword that was stuck in the ground not far away. Didn't you also use magic and a shield? We're even now. In the past 3 months, Noah and Alusha had been dueling like this almost every day, but they had always purely used sword techniques to train their own sword skills. This time, Alusha used magic first, and decisively gained the upper hand. Noah unexpectedly used the scabbard to counterattack, and then Alusha used a shield. Compared to the previous duels that were more of a training exercise, today's duel was more like a real battle. Of course, Noah and Alusha were very satisfied to be able to seriously engage in a battle. But being serious was one thing, but only the two of them knew how much skill they had used in this battle. At least, Alusha knew that Noah could still use 2 methods in this battle. The first method was the magic that Noah was so proud of. In the past 3 months, not only did Noah train a set of sword skills that could make Alusha suffer when she was careless, but his control over magic had also improved a lot compared to 3 months ago. 3 months ago, Noah was already able to control the mana equivalent to that of dozens of magic shooters to activate the ritual lake. Now, the amount of mana that he could control at once was definitely not less than that. In the previous battle, if Noah had used his own magic to improve his physical abilities like Alusha, even if he did not use all of his magic and only used the amount that he could control, then the extent of improvement would be much greater than what Alusha could achieve, and the battle would be much more advantageous. The reason why Noah did not use his magic and kept saying that he could not use his magic casually was because of Noah's own concerns. Alusha often heard in the guild that Noah had just been adopted by Makarov for a while, and Noah was so agitated that his magic went berserk, causing the entire guild to almost be destroyed many times. Because of this, Noah would definitely have concerns in all aspects before he could fully control his magic. Moreover, his opponent was Alusha, not an enemy, but a companion that they could learn from and improve together. Therefore, Noah would subconsciously not use his magic in the battle against Alusha. As for the second method, Alusha's gaze slanted towards the dazzling knight's sword that Noah had just picked up. Sensing the faint traces of aura on it, she recalled the scene when Noah truly used that sword in front of her for the first time. She laughed bitterly and began to evade the topic. I didn't think that you, who couldn't even see the trajectory of my sword 3 months ago, would be able to keep up with my speed and even defeat me 3 months later. You're admitting defeat just like that? That doesn't sound like something you would say, does it? Noah waved the knight's sword in his hand and looked at Alusha provocatively. How about it? Let's have another round. Of course, no problem. Alyssa responded firmly, and then changed the topic. Although I really want to say that, I just went to the guild, and the guild leader asked me to call you back. Back? Noah was stunned. What's wrong? Alusha smiled sweetly and said, we have a new companion. Chapter 21. The duel between Noah and Alusha only lasted for about 5 minutes before it ended. The two of them weren't too far away from the fairy tale guild. Thus, after about half an hour, Noah and Alusha returned to the guild. At this moment, Noah and Alusha both had a knight's sword in its scabbard at their waists. One of them was wearing an ordinary shirt, trousers, and a jacket, giving off a carefree aura. The other was wearing a cold armor, giving off a heroic aura. They looked like a pair. In addition to the 3 months of training together, Noah and Alusha's aura, posture, and pace had unknowingly reached the same state. If it wasn't for the fact that Noah's hair was black and not bright red, perhaps many people would have thought that the two of them were twins. Under such circumstances, the two of them directly returned to the guild and pushed open the guild door. Hearing the usual clamor inside and looking at the noisy scene in front of them, they looked at each other and smiled knowingly. Obviously, no matter if it was Noah or Alusha, they felt unusually close to the lively atmosphere of the fairy tale. Unfortunately, this amiable mood was quickly interrupted by a rude roar. Alusha! Accompanied by this immature roar, a figure jumped up from the table in front of them. Like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey, it fiercely pounced towards Alusha, who was beside Noah. Let's have a showdown. Hearing this, Alusha did not even lift her eyes, as if she was used to this scene. When the figure was not far from her, she nimbly shifted to the side and threw out a punch, heavily smashing the nose of the figure pouncing towards her. Pang! Ah! A muffled sound and a blood-curdling scream reverberated throughout the entire fairy tale guild. The figure that had pounced on Alyssa was also sent flying to the side like a large piece of trash. Noah, who was standing beside Alusha, was not as expressionless as Alusha, who did not even lift his eyelids. However, when the figure pounced towards Alusha, he calmly took a step back. Thus, the figure that was supposed to hit Noah flew past less than 10 centimeters in front of Noah, fiercely smashing into the wall not far away. Pang! Immediately, a hole was smashed into the wall. The figure that pounced towards Alusha was directly embedded into the wall, its eyes rolled back, mouth wide open, and slowly slid to the ground, smoke rising from its body. Really? At this time, Alusha finally sighed. I don't really want to fight today, so let's not duel. Can you not wait until you're done fighting before saying this? Noah could not help but cover his face. He then looked at Gray, who was only wearing a pair of shorts and had circles in his eyes. He felt that he had no strength left in his body. Also, Gray, I think it's necessary to put on clothes first before proposing a duel, at least when your opponent is a girl. Stop nagging. Gray, whose eyes were still in circles, could only lie on the ground and moan with tears in his eyes. At this time, a voice sounded from the corner of the guild. So strong. Hearing this unfamiliar voice, Noah and Alusha both immediately looked towards the direction of the voice. They saw that in front of the guild's bar, a little boy who looked about 10 years old, younger than Noah and Alusha, with rare cherry-colored hair and a thick scarf around his neck, was standing there. There was a luggage bag beside him, and it was obvious that he had just arrived at the guild. Hey! What's your name? The cherry-colored little boy was very excited and jumped, pointing at Alusha, and said this unceremoniously. You can actually take down that idiot in an instant. I'm interested in you now. Who are you calling an idiot? Gray, who was lying weakly on the ground, immediately jumped up as if he was revived, the veins on his forehead popping out. Do you want to fight? Hang your eyes. Forget it. Hang your eyes. The little boy laughed. You can't even beat a girl, I'm not afraid of you. Gray's expression suddenly froze, and he couldn't move. Not only Gray, but everyone in the guild also fell silent at this moment, causing the surrounding atmosphere to be very oppressive. It was as if a scourge was about to be born, and they looked at Alusha with fear. Oh. Alusha's mouth slightly curved into a happy arc, but this expression made everyone in the guild, except for Noah, tremble in their hearts. What's your name? Me. The little boy didn't seem to notice the change in the surrounding atmosphere, and he put his hands behind his head, revealing a bright smile. My name is Naz. Naz Delagner. Looking at the bright smile on the face of the little boy named Naz in front of him, Noah, who had been observing Naz, didn't know why, but his expression began to soften, as if he was basking in the soft sunshine, and he couldn't help but have a good impression of Naz. Not only Noah, Alusha, Gray, and everyone in the guild unconsciously approved of Naz under his bright smile, but they didn't show it on their faces, but they couldn't hide it from Noah, who was very familiar with everyone. Naz Delagner. What an incredible person. Noah, who had a good impression of Naz because of his outstanding personality and charm, took the lead to show his good intentions to Naz, and smiled slightly. My name is Noah. Noah Delagner. My name is Alusha. Alusha Chocolito. Noah and Alusha. Naz, who was extremely arrogant just a moment ago, raised his fingers and counted to 2 before smiling happily. Ignir, I've remembered 2 more names. Ignir? Noah asked curiously. Who is Ignir? Hearing these words, Naz puffed out his chest and said proudly. Egoniel is my father. He is the strongest dragon in the world. Dragon. Everyone in the fairy tale guild was collectively speechless. Dragon. Noah froze for a moment, then said in an uncertain tone. Naz, you mean, your father is a dragon? Yes. Seeing everyone in the guild showing a doubtful look, Naz shouted angrily as if he was insulted. I'm not lying. My magic was also taught to me by Egoniel. It's called Dragon Slayer magic. Everyone in fairy tale looked at each other in dismay. Although there were many excellent magic shooters in the fairy tale guild, there were not many who were truly knowledgeable because of their style. However, they had heard of the Dragon Slayer magic. It was a magic that could transform the user's physique into that of a dragon, and was used to kill dragons. It was said that the magic shooters who used the Dragon Slayer magic would have the physique of a dragon. Their skin would be comparable to dragon scales, their claws would be comparable to dragon claws, and their teeth would be comparable to dragon fangs. They could eat substances that corresponded to the type of a Dragon Slayer magic they practiced to recover their physical strength, magic, and increase their strength. Magic used to fight against dragons. Needless to say, it was definitely a very powerful magic. Such a powerful magic, and now, there was a child younger than Noah and Alusha saying that she knew it. Who would not doubt it? Besides, the Dragon Slayer magic was a lost magic, an ancient magic that had been lost. It was a super rare type in ancient times. Now that it suddenly appeared in front of them, who would believe it? Only Noah's expression gradually became serious after sensing the magic on Naz's body. Chapter 22. In Noah's perception, Naz's magic power was like a chemical substance. Every element that made up this chemical substance seemed to be clearly presented in front of Noah's eyes and imprinted into Noah's perception. Therefore, while the rest of the people in the fairy tale guild were still skeptical about Naz's words, Noah almost believed Naz. To some extent, a person's magic power could also be seen as a person's aura. If magic power was compared to water, every individual with magic power was a different kind of water, but water was still water. This would not change. However, in Noah's perception, Naz's magic power gave him a different feeling from others. How should he put it? If he had to make a metaphor, Naz's magic power could probably be compared to ink. Although ink could also be regarded as a kind of water, it was different from other water and definitely had its own taste. However, it could not be drunk and had a smell that ordinary water did not have. Even its color was black. It could be seen at a glance that it was different from water. Now, Naz's magic power gave Noah this feeling. Even if it was still water, it was obviously different from the magic power of ordinary people. It was very special. Of course, there was nothing strange about it being special. After all, Naz learned the lost magic that had been passed down from ancient times and even lost. It was not unusual for his magic power to be different from others. It was extremely special. However, Noah couldn't ignore it. There was no other reason. It was just because the feeling that Naz's magic power gave Noah was too similar to the feeling of magic power that Noah felt from Lax's. It was the kind of magic power that seemed to hide a beast in his body. And Naz, who had this feeling of magic power, was the owner of a dragon slayer magic. Could it be that Lax's, just when a guess arose in Noah's mind, at the entrance of the guild, an old voice echoed throughout the guild. What Naz said is all true. Under the gaze of all the members of the fairy tale guild, Makarov walked in from outside and said such a surprising sentence. Naz is indeed a magic shooter who learned the dragon slayer magic of fire. In other words, Naz is a magic shooter who slays dragons. Magic shooter who slays dragons. Everyone looked at Naz, who looked like he was about to cry just now, but now had a proud face. Is that true? Magic shooter who slays dragons. I didn't expect that this kind of ancient magic shooter would actually appear in the fairy tale, and it's a child. In addition to the magic shooters in the guild, Alusha said to Noah, who was next to her with interest. That child called Naz seems to be quite powerful. The dragon slayer magic of fire. Gray, who was still lying on the ground, stared at Naz and grinned. He's quite interesting. He's a guy worth a fight. Humph. Naz was like a little person with a long nose, standing with his arms akimbo and chest out as he laughed loudly. How is it? Are you scared? Isn't this good? Alusha, who was somewhat restless, stepped forward with a smile on her face. Why don't we have a competition? Competition. Everyone present suddenly became noisy, looking as if they wanted to see the world in chaos. Not bad, not bad. How about the kid called Naz compete with Alusha? Let us see the power of a magic shooter who slays dragons. With you. Naz's eyes also lit up, and he jumped out with a face full of excitement. Good. I'll defeat you. This will prove that I'm stronger than that idiot. Idiot. For the first time, Gray didn't make trouble, but looked at Naz with pity. You'll know how terrifying Alusha is later. Under the instigation of all the members of the fairy tale guild, Naz agreed without any surprise. Alusha also looked somewhat impatient. It seemed that she really had a little interest in the dragon slayer magic. Unfortunately, Alusha was destined to not be able to fight today. Alusha. Noah suddenly raised his head and said such a sentence. Why don't you give this competition to me? The whole place suddenly became quiet. Noah. Alusha looked at Noah with a face full of doubts. Are you an idiot? Gray directly showed a stunned expression. No matter how weak that idiot with the hedgehog head is, he's still a sorcerer. Noah, you haven't learned magic yet, why are you jumping out here? Haven't learned magic yet? Naz was even more surprised. If you haven't learned magic, how are you going to fight me? Not to mention Alusha, Naz, and Gray, even the members of the fairy tale guild were puzzled. Little Noah, don't be impulsive. Even if you want to fight with others, you have to wait until you learn magic, right? That's right, that's right. Let's wait until you learn magic first. Hearing this, Noah smiled but didn't say anything. His gaze directly met Naz's confused expression. How about it? Do you want to try? Seeing that Noah didn't have the slightest intention of giving up, everyone except Alusha started to discuss spiritedly. Naz. At this time, Makarov spoke. You can try with Noah. Okay. Although he didn't know what was going on, Naz still clenched his fist hotly. Since Grandpa President has said so, don't regret it later. Hearing Naz's words, Noah didn't say anything. He slowly nodded his head, a look of interest flashing past his eyes. Just as Alusha said, Noah did indeed have an interest in the Dragon Slayer magic. Although, it wasn't purely because the Dragon Slayer magic was a lost magic, or because it was a powerful magic used to fight against dragons. In the open space in front of the entrance of the Fairy Tale Guild, at this time, many people had formed a circle, surrounding two young teenagers. Do your best. Little Noah. Don't lose too. Dragon Slayer Sorcerer. Fight, fight. Okay. Standing in front of Noah, Naz looked at Noah, who was casually standing there with one hand holding the scabbard of the knight's sword at his waist. He raised a fist, his face full of excitement. I'm coming. After saying that, a rather impressive magic slowly rose from Naz's raised fist, and a flame suddenly burned from Naz's fist. Under the gaze of everyone present, he shouted and rushed straight towards Noah. Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. When Naz rushed to less than 2 meters in front of Noah, Naz jumped up and raised his fist high. The flame on it condensed slightly, and fiercely punched towards Noah's chest. A light breeze blew the hair in front of Noah's forehead, exposing a pair of pitch-black, extremely deep eyes under Noah's bangs in front of Naz's eyes. Staring at the fist covered in flames, when it was about to reach his chest, Noah took a step to the left unhurriedly. After 3 months of training, Noah's reflexes had been trained to be extremely outstanding. And in Noah's view, Naz's fist was simply too slow compared to Alusha's swift and violent slash. Thus, Noah's step just happened to dodge Naz's flame fist that was smashing towards him. His body slightly tilted, and his palm was like a needle, passing through Naz's arm and very lightly imprinted on Naz's shoulder. Bang! With a muffled sound, Naz, who was hit by Noah's palm, was like being struck by lightning. With a groan, he flew back at a speed faster than when he came, and finally smashed into the ground not far away. He cried out in pain and fell with his limbs in the air. The surrounding sound instantly disappeared. Chapter 23. Looking at Naz, who was knocked to the ground by Noah in one strike, the surrounding members of Fairy Tale were silent for a moment before they quickly became restless. Is that for real? Isn't this Archmage of the Dragon Slayer too weak? No, Naz still has some skills. His magic power is also outstanding among his peers. Other than Alusha, only Grey in the guild can compare to Naz. In other words, it's not that Naz is too weak, but that Noah is too strong. I knew it, the chairman's grandson definitely won't only have the advantage of having powerful magic power. The Archmages of Fairy Tale kept clamoring. As members of the same guild, adults, and Archmages, they could see how capable Naz was. Naturally, they could also see that Noah was the real deal. However, it was precisely because of this that the Archmage of the Dragon Slayer they were looking forward to was knocked down in one strike. This sudden unforeseen event caught everyone off guard. Below the stage, Grey's face was also filled with disbelief as he looked at Naz, who was knocked down. His mouth even formed an O shape. This guy, how did he become so strong? Makarov, who was standing slightly in front of the crowd, also opened his eyes wide. He looked at Noah, who was holding the scabbard of the knight's sword at his waist with one hand and didn't even change his position. He then looked at Alusha, who was beside him, with a matter-of-fact expression and couldn't help but smile. He's grown up. The surrounding clamor seemed to have woken Naz up. He flipped over, stood up, and fiercely glared at Noah. You actually dared to lie to me? Ha! Noah said blankly. When did I lie to you? You! Naz exclaimed in exasperation. You lied to me when you said you didn't know magic. First of all, I didn't say that. Second, even if I did, I didn't lie to you. Noah raised his hand and flipped it over, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What I just used was just a very ordinary attack. It didn't even have a bit of magic. You can't be saying that this is magic, right? Naz choked, and then a burst of anger rose in his heart. Are you trying to say that you can beat me even if you don't know magic? Following Nazi's roar, a scorching flame suddenly ignited from Nazi's body and covered his entire body. Looking at the slight distortion of the air around Nazi, the temperature was definitely not low. It was much stronger than the fire fist that Nazi used just now. This change made the surrounding people cry out in surprise. Even Noah was surprised. He could clearly feel that with the anger on Nazi's face, the magic power in Nazi's body had more or less grown. Even the flames on his body had become much more vigorous, as if all the emotions in his heart had been transformed into flames. Nazi's dragon slayer magic can actually change according to Nazi's emotions. Is this the ancient lost magic? Watch me beat you down. Nazi was like a creeping cheetah. He bounced up fiercely, stomped his feet on the ground, and rushed out. The flames on his body pulled out a long fire tail, rendering Nazi, who rushed out like a flaming meteor. Wherever he passed, stone chips and dust flew in all directions, and the temperature in the air rose sharply. Even Noah felt that his face had become a lot warmer. In the exclamations that had not yet dissipated, Nazi, who had turned into a flaming meteor, quickly rushed to Noah. The flames on his body gathered together, and he charged at Noah and slammed into him. Watch me. Fire Dragon Sword Horn. The sudden surge in strength made Nazi's attack bring about a strong oppressive wind, which made Noah's expression slowly condense. However, Noah didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. His right hand gently rested on the hilt of the knight's sword at his waist. Noah bent his body like a lion that was ready to attack. After a moment of silence, like an arrow leaving the bow, he didn't retreat but moved forward to meet the flaming meteor. Ha! Amidst the cold shout, a dazzling sword light suddenly appeared in the field under the shocked, astonished, and amazed gazes of the surrounding people. Like the waning moon at night, it seemed to be able to cut through space. Accompanied by a clear sword cry, it fiercely clashed with the flaming meteor. The expected fierce collision didn't appear. The waning moon-like sword light was like an illusory image. It directly swept through the flaming meteor as if it was cutting through water. In the end, it swept out from the end of the flaming meteor's fiery tail. After the waning moon-like sword light swept out from the end of the flaming meteor, the sword light and the flaming meteor strangely disappeared at the same time. It was as if they never existed in the first place. In the center of the field, Noah still maintained his posture with one hand on the hilt of the knight's sword at his waist. Nazi also maintained his posture like a creeping cheetah that was about to spring out. Both of them lowered their heads, and their expressions couldn't be seen clearly. It was as if nothing had happened. However, no one would believe that the scene just now was an illusion. Because the temperature in the air still hadn't dropped, and the gravel and dust in the field hadn't dispersed. Noah and Nazi's positions were replaced by each other. They had their backs facing each other, which was completely opposite from the position they were in at the beginning of the confrontation. Around them, everyone in the fairy's tale subconsciously held their breaths and didn't make any more noise. Makarov, Alusha, and Gray also stared closely at the two people on the field. Their expressions were solemn as they watched quietly. Not long after, the silence in the field was broken. Ugh. Nazi, who had his back facing Noah, whimpered. His eyes drew circles as if he was drunk. His body swayed for a while before falling to the ground unconscious. Noah then raised his head and let go of the hilt of the knight's sword at his waist. He turned sideways and looked at the fallen Nazi. He made a V gesture in the direction of Makarov, Alusha, and Gray. Clap, 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 clap. Only then did everyone present come to their senses. They laughed loudly and applauded loudly. Good job, little Noah. You've become stronger. What a powerful sword. As expected of the president's grandson, he's really different. The people here were all magic shooters from the fairy's tale. Even the weakest one was much stronger than Gray. Although not everyone knew what had just happened, most of them still knew. When Nazi's explosive attack that exceeded his full strength was about to land on him, Noah quickly pulled out his sword at a violent speed that most people on the field could only see a flash of sword light. He didn't retreat but advanced. When he brushed past the flaming meteor that Nazi had turned into, his sword hit Nazi's abdomen and made him unconscious. Seeing that Noah still maintained his sword-drawing posture after the attack, it was clear that after hitting Nazi, Noah returned his sword to the scabbard at a speed that couldn't be seen clearly. With all these factors added together, it resulted in the scene where the two of them exchanged positions and had their backs facing each other. Of course, looking at Nazi's unconscious appearance, Noah must have been merciful and didn't really slash him with his sword. Otherwise, Nazi would have at least bled. This guy. Gray didn't hide his shock. He actually secretly became so strong by himself. He's really cunning. Makarov, who heard Gray talking to himself, laughed and turned his head to look at Alusha. I'm sorry to trouble you with Noah. It's all Noah's own efforts to have such outstanding sword skills. Alusha shook her head and smiled as she looked at Noah, who was surrounded by everyone in the field. Moreover, I've also received a lot of care, Makarov nodded with a smile. His gaze turned to Noah and the look in his eyes gradually became peaceful. Do your best, my grandson. Chapter 24. Magnolia, Forest Riverbank, Wang. The surge of mana caused the air to vibrate and expand like ripples, wrapping around the pitch-black beads and suspending them beside the owner of the mana. Noah's eyes were closed, and pitch-black beads covered in the light of magic floated around him. It was almost exactly the same as when he trained his magic power control in the past. However, in the next moment, Noah did something different. Noah opened his eyes abruptly, exposing his dark eyes that were as deep and dazzling as the stars in the sky. He gently raised his hands, as if he was trying to lift something up. His palms were facing upwards, and he couldn't help but raise them up. Wang wang wang. Following Noah's actions, the mana that surged out from Noah's body became denser and denser, causing the glow on the pitch-black beads to increase greatly. Then, the pitch-black beads began to move. Chi-chi. In the extremely soft sound of breaking through the air, the pitch-black beads seemed to have a life of their own as they circled back and forth around Noah's body. They drew a beautiful trajectory and their speed became faster and faster. Chi-chi-chi-chi. Not long after, the entire forest riverbank was filled with the sharp sound of breaking through the air. Bang! Until a certain moment, two pitch-black beads that were circling back and forth at high speed suddenly collided with each other, making a dull sound of collision and bouncing off each other. Bang 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 bang. This collision seemed to have caused a chain reaction as the dull sound of collision sounded one after another, causing the number of pitch-black beads circling around Noah's body to decrease gradually. It was unknown how long it took before it stopped. However, when it stopped, the number of pitch-black beads floating around Noah's body was only about 1/10 of what it was at the beginning. Clap 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 clap. Alusha, who had been watching from the side from the beginning to the end, applauded and praised. Your mana control is much stronger than before. It's really getting stronger and stronger. At this rate, it won't be long before you can completely control all of your mana, right? It's still early, Noah said, but the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curve up. With this level of mana control, once I use all my mana, it's still possible for me to go berserk, isn't it? But at the very least, as long as you don't use all of your mana, you won't go berserk like you did in the guild. Alusha chuckled as she folded her arms. Or rather, before you learn magic, with your current mana control, it's unlikely for your mana to go berserk. This is a good thing. Like you said, this was before I learned magic. Noah stopped smiling and sighed. In the process of learning magic, every magic shooter will increase their mana along with the improvement of their magic. My mana is already so strong that I can't completely control it. If it increases, I really can't stand it. When exactly can I start learning magic? Hearing Noah's sigh, Alusha felt strange. The strength of a magic shooter's mana was directly related to their strength. The stronger a person's mana was, the more powerful the spells they could cast would be, increasing their combat ability. The more mana a person had, the more time they could use spells, extending their combat time. Therefore, being able to increase one's mana was almost equivalent to increasing one's own strength. Therefore, the increase of mana had always been the dream of every magic shooter. It was also the main goal that every magic shooter inevitably needed to be immersed in on their path to increasing their own strength. In any case, being able to increase one's mana was definitely a good thing. Now, such a good thing coming out of Noah's mouth was like a disaster. Perhaps, he was the only one in the whole world who was like this. While feeling this way in her heart, Alusha said to Noah. The president also said that with your hard work, it's only a matter of time before you can fully control your powerful magic. Learning magic is only a matter of time. Moreover, even if you don't know magic, you're not completely powerless now, right? Hearing this, some of the awkward feelings in Noah's heart disappeared. He couldn't help but reach out and tighten his grip on the knight's sword at his waist. The expression on his face finally looked better. Today's training will end here. Alusha looked at the sky. It's time to show up in the guild. Noah nodded indifferently and walked in the direction of the guild with Alusha. Go to hell. Hang your eyes. You're the one who's going to die. Hang your eyes. When Noah and Alusha pushed open the door of the fairy tale guild and walked into the bar, two familiar voices filled with passion and anger sounded. Then, a series of crackling sounds of something being smashed and thrown could be heard. Although they didn't see the interior of the guild clearly, Noah and Alusha almost instantly knew what happened when they heard these voices. They looked at each other and sighed. Pervert. Hedgehog head. Exhibitionist. Stuffy bastard. Along with the extremely low level of curses, in the bar on the first floor of the guild, Naz and Gray were wrestling with each other as if they had a life and death feud. Whether it was Naz or Gray, both of their faces were more or less bruised. Seeing this scene, not only did none of their companions in the guild come forward to stop the fight, they instead shouted as if they were watching a show. Even Makarov was sitting at the bar, drinking and sighing. It's so good to be young. Seeing this, Noah sighed again. Alusha understood. Alusha stepped forward expressionlessly and came to the side of Naz and Gray who were wrestling with each other. They didn't notice Alusha approaching them. She stretched out her hand and accurately pressed Naz and Gray's heads. Stop it now. After saying that, Alusha directly pushed Naz and Gray apart. No, it wasn't just a separation. Yuwa. The overly strong force directly pushed the two boys who were around 30 kilograms away. Their necks made a hakacha sound that made one's scalp numb as they laid on the ground in pain. How about you guys stop for a day? Noah walked to Alusha's side and looked at Naz and Gray who were lying on the ground with a headache expression on his face. You guys fight all day long and I don't see a winner. Shut up. Naz jumped up energetically and then noticed that the person who spoke was Noah. His eyes immediately shone. Noah. Let's fight it out. Alusha. Gray also jumped up. Why don't you fight me as well? After saying that, the two jumped up at the same time and pounced in the direction of Noah and Alusha, who were standing together in the middle. However, one pounced on Noah and the other pounced on Alusha. Seeing that Naz and Gray pounced on them without saying anything, Noah and Alusha's expressions collapsed. When Naz and Gray pounced on them, they raised their hands at the same time and formed a hand-knife shape. They released a heavy blow that ordinary people couldn't see at the opponent's abdomen, who challenged them unilaterally. Bang! Oh! Naz and Gray, who were directly hit in the abdomen by a hand knife, had their eyes protruded out. After their bodies froze for a while, they softly fell to the ground and couldn't get up anymore. Ha 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 ha! The people around them all laughed exaggeratedly. Naz and Gray were fighting and were immediately stopped by Alusha. After that, the two were unwilling to be outdone and challenged Noah and Alusha at the same time. However, they were knocked down by Noah and Alusha in one move. Now, it happened almost every day. Should I say, is this really the style of this guild? Chapter 25. On the other side, Makarov, who was sitting at the bar, looked at the scene of Naz and Gray being defeated by Noah and Alusha in one move. He paused in his action of raising the glass to his mouth, and a hint of hesitation appeared in his eyes, but it disappeared immediately. Noah. Alusha. Makarov, who had made up his mind, put the glass in his hand on the bar next to him, and waved to Noah and Alusha. You two come here, I have something to say to you. Noah and Alusha, who were about to preach to Naz and Gray, were startled at the same time. They looked at Makarov with a puzzled face, and habitually looked at each other, seeing the puzzlement and curiosity in each other's eyes. Noah, who came to Makarov with Alusha, tilted his head and asked, "Grandpa, what's wrong? Is there anything we can help with?" No, it's about your own matters. Makarov burped with the smell of alcohol, and said something that surprised Noah and Alusha with this sloppy look. I just want to ask you, do you want to start officially accepting commissions and go out to work? Work? Noah and Alusha's eyes lit up. Work? The others in the guild also exclaimed, and even the half-dead Naz and Gray jumped up. The so-called magic shooters were, in fact, a special group of people who could use mana and release magic. Generally speaking, as long as one could use magic proficiently, no matter what kind of magic it was, this person could be called a magic shooter. However, for magic shooters, they were more inclined to be able to use magic and join a guild. Only then would they be considered a proper magic shooter. After all, magic shooters had to complete all kinds of work to earn remuneration. A proper guild that could accept commissions from all over the Fiori Kingdom and provide options for the magic shooters in the guild was naturally indispensable. That was why there was such an unspoken rule. So strictly speaking, Noah, who had not started learning magic, could not be considered a proper magic shooter even though he had joined the guild. As for Alusha, she was already quite proficient in using magic, and was even better than the average adult magic shooters. In addition, she also had excellent swordsmanship and skills in using various weapons. In a way, she was more mature than Noah on the path of a magic shooter. However, even so, Makarov did not allow Alusha to accept commissions and go out to work. Instead, he allowed Alusha to improve her abilities first. When she had a certain ability and could take charge of things independently, he would then admit that Alusha had the ability to go out to work. Before that, Alusha's living expenses were paid by the guild. When Alusha was able to go out to work, she would use her remuneration to pay for it. Therefore, Alusha, who could use magic proficiently and was a member of the fairy tale, could be called a magic shooter. However, to the internal members of the guild, a child who could not work was naturally not considered a mature magic shooter. Even Alusha was like this, not to mention Noah, who had not started learning magic. Now, Makarov's words were admitting that Noah and Alusha already had the ability to accept commissions, go out to work, and take charge of things independently. How could Noah and Alusha not be happy? How could the rest of the fairy tale not be surprised? After all, even Laxus waited until he was 13 years old before Makarov admitted that he had the ability to take charge of things independently and allowed him to accept commissions from the guild and go out to work. Grandpa. Thus, after the excitement, Noah, who had calmed down first, had a look of worry on his face. Is it okay to let us go out to work now? Hearing Noah's words, Alusha, Naz, Gray, and the rest of the guild reacted. I know what you are worried about, but since I asked this, it naturally means that you have a certain degree of ability and can take charge of things independently. Otherwise, how could I allow you to go out to work so easily? In front of everyone in the guild, Makarov jumped down from the bar counter and put his hands behind his back. He raised his head and looked at Alusha. Alusha, although your equipment-changing magic is very common, your mastery of magic is not inferior to some of the magic shooters in the guild. Moreover, you have outstanding swordsmanship. Even the magic shooters in the guild do not have this ability. The average magic shooters are no longer your opponent. After saying this, Makarov looked at Noah, who had been staring at him, and smiled until his eyes narrowed into slits. As for Noah, although you have not officially started learning magic, you have already developed swordsmanship that is not inferior to Alusha's in this period of time. Even if your ability is not as good as Alusha's when she goes all out, it is not far off. Makarov vaguely glanced at the knight's sword that he had given to Noah at his waist. He made up his mind and nodded at Noah. In the situation where you have not yet learned how to use magic, you already have the ability that the average magic shooters cannot compare to. Accepting missions and going out for a walk can also broaden your horizons and increase your experience. It will be of great importance to the progress of your ability in the future. Therefore, you should also have some confidence in yourself. Hearing this, Noah fell silent. President. After a while, Alusha spoke with a stern expression. Please let me go out to work. It seemed that Alusha had already made her decision. And Alusha's decision also made the trace of hesitation in Noah's heart disappear. He took a deep breath and nodded at Makarov. Grandfather, no, President, I have also decided to officially accept missions and go out to work. Please allow me. Very good. Makarov grinned. Then, from today onwards, the two of you officially have the right to accept missions and go out to work. The mission form will be posted on the mission board. You can take a look at it yourselves. If you like it, just tear off the form and come to me to go through the procedures. Yes. Seeing that the two youngest magic shooters in the guild were born just like that, everyone in the guild sent their blessings. Although Noah and Alusha were still young, their strength was obvious to all. They could deal with Naz and Gray, who were only 1 or 2 years younger than them, cleanly every time. In addition, there were a few duels from time to time. Everyone also admitted that Noah and Alusha had the strength to rival real magic shooters. Go out to work. Naz shouted with a face full of excitement. It sounds pretty good. It's still too early for you. Gray's eyes were also filled with envy, but more of it was sarcasm toward Naz. If you accept the mission, I'm afraid that even the client won't care about you. What did you say? Droopy eyes idiot. I'm talking about you. Droopy eyes bast *RD. In an instant, Naz and Gray, who were filled with envy and jealousy, started fighting again. Let's start with simple missions at the beginning. Makarov advised after explaining some of the necessary precautions to Noah and Alusha. After all, you're still young and inexperienced. Even if you're willing to take on high-level missions, the client won't be willing to hire you. Let's start with simple missions, preferably those that are more suitable for you." Noah and Alusha nodded one after another, which made Makarov smile. "Of course, you can also choose to team up first. It's good to have a companion by your side. Team up." Noah and Alusha looked at each other at the same time, and then as if they saw through each other's heart, they smiled tacitly. "Not for the time being." Noah gave the answer directly. "Grandpa, you just said that we have to familiarize ourselves with the work first, so let's do it alone for the first time." "Of course, we'll start with simple." "All right." Makarov didn't object. Noah and Alusha said a few words to each other and found their favorite missions. Chapter 26. Fairy Tale was the #1 magic guide guild in the Fiori Kingdom. In terms of scale and strength, there were less than 5 guilds in the Fiori Kingdom that could compete with Fairy Tale. Naturally, Fairy Tale would receive many quests from all over the Fiori Kingdom every day, and there were all kinds of quests. Noah, who was standing in front of the quests, saw simple quests such as finding some items, chasing away thieves or hooligans, slightly difficult quests such as removing curses that required the use of magic, and even more difficult quests such as annihilating illegal magic shooter organizations and harming magical creatures, etc. Generally speaking, the harder the quest, the higher the reward. Needless to say, the more life-threatening the quest, the higher the reward would be. However, these quests were not within the scope of Noah's consideration as he had just been able to go out to work. After discussing with Alusha, the two of them decided that the difficulty of their first quest could not be too high, and it could not be too far away. Otherwise, if they were alone, there would be all kinds of trouble. Whether there would be danger or not, there was no guarantee in terms of efficiency. Therefore, those quests that required them to go to distant places and were more dangerous, as well as those quests that required the use of magic, were all eliminated by Noah. Alusha had unknowingly torn down a list of quests and went to Makarov to receive the quest, preparing to go out to work. Noah, on the other hand, looked at the list of quests for a while before fixing his gaze on one of them. He stretched out his hand and tore down the list of quests. "Have you decided?" Makarov, who had been standing behind Noah, nodded his head when he saw the quest that Noah had chosen. "This quest seems a little strange, but the difficulty shouldn't be too high. However, you still have to be careful. If you find that you can't solve it, or if you feel that it's dangerous, don't try to be brave and just give up the quest. You're still young." Hearing Makarov's words, Noah nodded, but his hand tightly grasped the letter of commission in his hand. His heart was slightly surging. The blue sky was boundless. The green field full of vitality was bottomless. In the endless green field, at the end of a walkway, an 11 or 12-year-old boy was carrying a long cloth bag on his shoulder, as if he was carrying an ankle-length backpack. He carried it on his shoulder strap with one hand and held a piece of paper with the other as he walked forward. Along the way, many people who were grazing in the green field cast curious, doubtful, and scrutinizing gazes at the young man walking on the walkway. Perhaps they were all wondering in their hearts, which family's child had gone missing. In fact, along the way, Noah did encounter many kind-hearted people who came to ask if they were lost, or if they were touched by human traffickers who came out of nowhere, making Noah feel quite helpless. However, this kind of encounter ended here. At a certain moment, Noah came to a halt and looked ahead. A village. It was a village not too far from Magnolia. At least, even if Noah didn't take a car, he still walked to his destination, although it took a lot of time. Looking at the village not far in front of him, and then looking at the letter of commission in his hand, Noah once again confirmed that his destination was this village in front of him. This time the commission was issued by the village chief of this village. Generally speaking, the commissions issued by a small village like this were either to chase away some wild beasts or bandits, or to search for medicinal herbs and medicinal materials for curing diseases. There were very few commissions that were difficult or dangerous. Therefore, Noah chose to accept the commission issued by this village. Of course, Noah also confirmed the content of the commission. How to put it? He didn't know if it was difficult or not, but he didn't know if it was easy or not. Anyway, it was a little strange. With this kind of feeling, Noah was led by a villager to a house and met the village chief. The village chief was an old man, perhaps even older than Makarov. He leaned on a cane, bent over, and his white beard dragged directly to the ground. The old man first sized up Noah, then said in a long tone, "Welcome, guest from a fairy tale." Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but look at the old man in front of him a little higher. Just now, Noah clearly saw a trace of suspicion in the old man's eyes. Obviously, the old man was puzzled that the magic shooter who came to his village to solve his village's problem was actually such a young child. But even so, the old man didn't say anything, nor did he want to confirm anything with him. First, he expressed his welcome, and didn't have the slightest bit of dissatisfaction because of his young age. Noah didn't know if the old man chose to believe in his ability to complete the mission because he was a member of fairy tale, or if the old man wanted to use peaceful means before resorting to force. In short, the old man didn't make things difficult for Noah at first, which made Noah feel a lot more relaxed. Although the key to activating the ritual lake mission was Noah, the contact, conversation, and negotiation with the client was basically done by Laxus. Because of this, strictly speaking, this was the first time Noah was working independently, and he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. The old man's actions dispelled this little bit of nervousness, and made Noah's heart feel lighter, and he greeted the old man. "Hello, village chief, I am a magic shooter from Fairy Tale, and I am here to help you solve your problem." "Thank you very much for your help." The village chief nodded his head very slowly. "Although the scale of our village isn't big, we still provide 1 or 2 inns for guests on the journey. If there is a need, we will entertain you for free. Do you need to rest first? It is indeed a little late now, and not very suitable for work. If you can let me rest for a night, I would be very grateful. But before that, I have some questions that I would like to ask the village chief." Noah held up the commission in his hand, and asked with a little uncertainty in his tone. "The commission clearly states that the task is to drive away ghosts. What is this all about?" "Yes. Drive away ghosts." This was the question that Noah found inconceivable. Although this was a world where magic was quite prevalent, and even integrated into people's daily lives, there were also some magical creatures that could endanger people's lives. Noah had even heard Makarov say that there were demons in this world. But ghosts and whatnot, did they really exist? Perhaps they did exist, but Noah had never seen them before, so it was inevitable that he would feel some doubts. Not to mention Noah, even if it was someone else, they would probably be filled with doubts like Noah. After all, some of the ancient villages did not have as much knowledge as the residents of the towns and cities outside. Sometimes, it was not impossible for some special phenomena, the activities of weak magical creatures, and the tricks of humans with bad intentions to really be ghosts. If this was really the case, this task would not be difficult to solve, but he was afraid that there was something else that Noah could not solve. Therefore, Makarov's suggestion was only to come and take a look. If there was anything wrong, this type of commission was allowed to be abandoned. No matter what, if there were really ghosts causing trouble, Noah did not have the means to drive them away, right? Therefore, it was necessary to ask clearly. It was not known if the village chief also understood this point, but seeing that Noah directly asked about work, he started to explain slowly. Actually, not long ago, the villagers who went into the forest to hunt often heard the sound of ghosts crying. Chapter 27. Actually, not too long ago, the villagers who went hunting in the forest often heard the sound of a spirit crying. With this as the starting point, the village chief began to explain. Not too far away from the village, there was a forest that was rarely visited by humans. There wasn't anything special about this forest, unlike the forest beside Villa Magnolia where there were all kinds of magical creatures. This was just a normal forest. At most, there were only a few wild beasts or weak magical creatures. Because of this, the village treated this forest as a hunting ground. Every day, they would go hunting in the forest, and it was the main source of food for the village. Not too long ago, when many villagers went hunting in the forest, they could faintly hear the sound of a girl crying. At first, the villagers thought that it was a child who had mistakenly entered the forest, and wanted to find the child and bring her out. Who knew? Before the villagers could begin to search for the child, a strange phenomenon occurred. Noah naturally didn't know what the strange phenomenon was. But according to the village chief, there was a hole in the sky. Because of this strange phenomenon, the villagers didn't continue to search for the child. But since then, they could still hear the sound of the child crying in the forest from time to time. Moreover, there would always be a hole in the sky from time to time, which made people's hair stand on end. Thus, the saying that the crying child in the forest was a spirit that would bring a curse when she cried, and the spirit that caused the sky to crack spread throughout the village. The villagers in the village were relatively simple people, and they didn't doubt this saying at all. Thus, gradually, the villagers didn't dare to enter the forest to hunt anymore. This caused the village, which used the prey in the forest as their main source of food, to not have as much food as before, which caused quite a bit of trouble. With no other choice, the village chief could only send out a request to the nearest magic guide guild, and invite someone to banish the spirit. To be more precise, it should be to find the true source of the crying and the truth behind the crack in the sky, so that the village could return to its previous state. The reward was pooled together by the villagers. Although it's not much, only 200,000 J, we still want to ask for your help. The village chief slightly lowered his head and bent his waist. For his age, this kind of bow was already the limit. Can you accept our request? Noah frowned slightly and fell silent. It wasn't that Noah didn't want to accept the commission, but the commission itself had too many uncertainties. Noah didn't know if he could complete the commission by himself. As for the reward, for such an uncertain mission, it was neither too much nor too little. It could only be said that as long as there were no accidents, the reward would be considerable. Moreover, Noah didn't care much about the reward. In terms of money, he still had the 1 million J reward from the last activation of the Ritual Lake mission. He wasn't in a hurry to use money, so he didn't need to care too much about the reward. After pondering for a while, Noah said, "To be honest, village chief, there are too many uncertainties in this case. We can't be sure if it was the spirit that caused the sky to crack. I can't guarantee that I can provide help to all of you, so I would like to stay in the village for the night and go to the forest to take a look tomorrow. Is that okay?" "Yes. Thank you very much." The village chief's voice was a little more relaxed, which made Noah smile. He tightened the long cloth bag on his shoulder like a backpack and began to think about what he should pay attention to for tomorrow's mission. As a village, although the scale of this village wasn't big, it wasn't very backward. Although the houses were a little old compared to the buildings in Magnolia, the style was almost the same, unlike some villages that only had stone houses. The inn provided to Noah was a little small, but it was impeccable. There was nothing to complain about. Under the village chief's instructions, the owner of the inn also knew that Noah was a magic shooter from fairy tale. He had specially come to help the village solve the problem caused by the spirit, so he didn't charge Noah for the accommodation. However, unlike the village chief, when the owner of the inn found out that the sorcerer who came from fairy tale was such a child, although he did not say anything, there was an unconcealable disappointment in his eyes, which made Noah quite gloomy. Let's hope tomorrow's mission can be completed smoothly." With this thought in mind, Noah settled down a little and came out of the room. He sat down at a wooden table in the inn's lobby, ordered some food, and began to replenish the energy he had expended during the day's travel. However, just as Noah was enjoying his dinner, 3 people came to the entrance of the inn. They were about 11 or 12 years old. They should be the same age as Noah, but they were very eye-catching. As for why, it was because these 3 boys and girls around the age of 11 or 12 all had a head of eye-catching white hair. Standing in the middle was a girl with long white hair tied into a ponytail. She was wearing a revealing swimsuit. Her face was very ugly, and her eyes were very fierce. Standing on the left of the girl was a boy who was wearing a formal suit and shorts like a student. His figure was considered tall and sturdy among his peers. His skin was a little dark, but his face had a weak expression. It was a sharp contrast to the ponytailed girl. It made people wonder if there was a mistake. As for the one standing on the right of the girl, it was a little girl who was the shortest and looked the youngest. She had the head of a little sister and was wearing a cute dress. At this time, the little girl with the head of a little sister was saying something to the ponytailed girl with a face full of worry, but the ponytailed girl turned a deaf ear. The tall and sturdy boy also seemed to be trying to persuade the ponytailed girl with a weak face. As a result, the ponytailed girl glared fiercely at him. He shrunk his head and hit to the side without any backbone. His face looked as if he was about to cry, which made people unable to help but laugh. This strange trio naturally attracted Noah's attention. He immediately slowed down his eating speed and observed them with interest. Just as Noah was observing the 3 white-haired boys and girls, the ponytailed girl seemed to have noticed Noah's gaze. She turned her head and her gaze met with Noah's. Noah could clearly see that the other party's face was clearly unhappy. It was obvious that she did not like Noah's gaze. Just as she was about to glare at Noah, she noticed the fairy tale guild emblem on the back of Noah's right hand. The ponytailed girl was startled, and then a puzzled expression appeared on her face. It was as if she was painstakingly looking for someone, but in the end found that the person she was looking for did not match the appearance of the person she was looking for. However, the ponytailed girl quickly threw this to the side. Ignoring the advice of the weak boy and the worried girl, she walked towards Noah's direction. Seeing this, no matter how stupid Noah was, he could guess it. The other party was coming for him. "Hey!" As expected, the ponytailed girl directly arrived in front of Noah's table and asked very rudely, "You are the sorcerer of fairy tale? The person who came to resolve the ghost incident in the forest beside this village?" The ponytailed girl's tone sounded like she was looking for trouble, causing Noah to frown deeply. He put down the cutlery in his hand. "Sister Mira." At this moment, the girl with the head of a younger sister wearing a cute one-piece dress came over. She pulled on the ponytailed girl's arm as if trying to mediate a fight. She lowered her head deeply to Noah and apologized profusely. I'm sorry. Sister Mira did not mean any harm. I'm really sorry." The tall and sturdy boy also came over and bowed fiercely to Noah. "My sister really did not mean any harm. Please don't blame her." Noah nodded at the 3 of them. There was no anger in his tone. "May I ask why you are looking for me?" "My name is Mira Jenny Strauss." The young girl named Myra's delicate face curled into a sinister smile as she said these words. "Although I'm very sorry, your job is now ours." Chapter 28. Mira, Jenny Strauss. That was the name of the girl who exuded the aura of a bad girl. Elfman Strauss. That was the name of the burly youth with the weak aura. Lisanna Strauss. That was the name of the little girl who seemed like an obedient little sister. It was easy to tell the relationship between the 3 just by looking at their surnames. In fact, the 3 of them were indeed siblings. Of course, Noah only found out about this after the fact, including Elfman and Lasana's names. As for now, Noah was only dumbfounded. My job belongs to you guys. Noah looked at Mira, Elfman, and Lisana with a confused expression on his face. After a while, he opened his mouth and said, "What's the matter?" "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you mean. Can you explain it more clearly?" "I think what I said just now has explained everything very clearly." Mira put her hands on her hips and looked down at Noah. Her delicate face was not inferior to a luscious, but it was filled with contempt that destroyed her beauty. "Moreover, looking at you, I don't think you have the ability to solve this ghost incident. So, be smart and give us the job." At this point, Myra's words were no longer as simple as being arrogant and looking for trouble. Instead, she had offended him. Therefore, even Noah, who was very good at controlling his emotions, couldn't help but feel a little displeased with Myra's words. He unconsciously reached out his hand and touched the long cloth bag at the side. He looked at Mira and the corners of his lips curled up. "You mean to say that you have the ability to solve this matter even though you're about the same age as me?" Hearing this, Mira did not respond to Noah's words immediately. Instead, he glanced at the strip-shaped cloth bag that Noah was stroking. He still had a sinister expression on his face, but a hint of vigilance secretly rose in his heart. After all, it wasn't difficult for people to guess what was inside a cloth bag of this shape. However, Mira didn't have the slightest intention of letting him off. "You think you're a magic shooter just because you're armed? It's pretty easy to be a magic shooter for fairy tale." Noah, who had just turned a blind eye to Myra's words, suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze towards Mira began to turn cold, and even the mana in his body began to boil a little. "Can I take it that you're provoking fairy tale?" Ever since he was adopted by Makarov, Noah had lost control of his emotions a few times in fairy tale, causing the mana in his body to go berserk and almost destroyed the entire fairy tale. Noah constantly reminded himself that he had to remain calm no matter what happened. This was also the reason why Noah, at such a young age, was able to display a calmness that even adults couldn't possess. It was also because of this that Laxus, who usually didn't get along with Noah, would target Noah. Noah's emotions weren't easily affected by Laxus, which made Laxus somewhat annoyed, or rather, somewhat afraid of his younger brother. His attitude towards Noah was extremely bad. With Laxus's character, he wouldn't admit that he was somewhat afraid of his younger brother who wasn't easily affected. This was why he targeted Noah every time, attempting to break Noah's calmness that even he was somewhat afraid of. Therefore, if Laxus was present, he would definitely know that there were only 3 factors that could affect Noah's emotions. The first was regarding Makarov, who had raised Noah. The second was causing harm to the people close to Noah. The third was any insult to the fairy's tale. It could be said that Myra's words had unintentionally triggered Noah's emotions. Mira seemed to have felt a flash of mana from Noah's body. Her heart tightened, and her body stiffened slightly. Although it was only for a moment, when she felt that flash of mana from Noah's body, a sense of danger arose in her heart. "Sister Mira." Lisana didn't seem to have felt anything. When she saw Noah's gaze turn cold, she hurriedly grabbed Myra's hand and lowered her head to Noah. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." "Please don't be angry," Elfman said with a nervous expression, but he still spoke up. "We really don't mean any harm. They were already here looking for trouble, and they still didn't mean any harm. If it was anyone else, they would have definitely lost their cool and started fighting with the trio in front of them." Fortunately, Noah wasn't someone who acted rashly. He took a deep breath and calmed his slightly fluctuating emotions, looking straight at the trio in front of him. "I roughly understand why you're here. You want to take on the mission issued by this village, right?" Mira snorted coldly and turned her head away, as if she didn't want to explain anything. Elfman nodded repeatedly, while Lisanna seemed to be a little angry at her sister's actions. The three siblings' reactions were so different that Noah couldn't help but feel a little helpless. "I just want to ask." Noah stared at the trio in front of him. "Were you sent by the ruler of the underworld, Phantom's Lord?" Ruler of the underworld, Phantom's Lord. Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna were all stunned, somewhat at a loss. Seeing this, Noah knew that the three siblings weren't sent by the ruler of the underworld, Phantom's Lord. Just like the last time, they were here to make things difficult for Fairy Tale. "Then, why are you stealing my job?" Noah directly asked. "I don't think I've offended you, right?" Hearing Noah's words, Elfman and Lisanna actually lowered their heads, looking somewhat guilty. Mira was the only one who didn't hold back. "You don't need to know that. Anyway, you're a magic shooter of Fairy Tale. Just go back to the guild and change your mission. Leave the mission here to us." Noah raised an eyebrow and ignored Mira, turning his gaze to Lisanna. He could see that among the three siblings, Mira was the standard delinquent girl, and it was hard to communicate with her reasonably. Elfman's personality was rather weak, and even if he was asked, he would only stutter. Only this youngest girl called Lisanna was easier to talk to, and wouldn't ask so many questions. "I'm really sorry." Lisanna's first sentence was still an apology, and her cute face was full of regret. "But we really need this mission. If possible, I hope you can give it to us." "Lisanna, why are you saying so much to him?" Mira looked at Noah with an unkind expression. "Kid, I said before that your job is ours. If you don't want to be beaten up by me and then run back home, just give up." "Sister Mira." Lisanna's tone was full of anger and helplessness. Obviously, she was already very hurt by her sister's bad attitude. Noah sighed, picked up the long cloth bag at the side, and stood up. "Although I don't know why you're saying that you need this mission, I'm guessing that you've gone to the village chief's house and been told that I've already accepted the mission. That's why you're looking for me and hoping that I'll give up, right?" After saying that, Noah put on a mischievous smile and said, "Since that's the case, then try to steal my job." After saying that, without waiting for Mira and the others to say anything, Noah ran out. "Don't run." Elfman and Lisanna were shocked, and Mira was so agitated that she cried out, grabbing one in each hand and running out of the door. Chapter 29. Night fell quietly. In this world completely shrouded in darkness, all signs of life seemed to have been erased. Even the vast forest that was full of vitality couldn't escape the engulfment of the darkness. When night fell completely, Noah arrived at the entrance of the forest that was engulfed in darkness. Looking at the vast forest that stretched as far as the eye could see, he sighed in his heart. If possible, Noah really didn't want to carry out the mission of dispelling ghosts at night. Although Noah wasn't afraid of ghosts, that didn't mean that he liked ghosts. Therefore, in the face of an unknown existence like a ghost, even if Noah didn't know whether it actually existed or not, he still hoped to carry out this mission during the day. At least his mood would be a lot more relaxed. Unfortunately, the appearance of the three Strauss siblings disrupted Noah's plan. To be honest, although the three Strauss siblings' request was somewhat unreasonable, Mira was right. For Noah, who was the magic shooter of Fairy Tale, it wasn't a big deal even if he gave up on this mission. At most, he would just return to the guild and get another one. Didn't Makarov also say that if there was no way to complete the mission, there was no need to force it and just give up? The Strauss siblings seemed to have some reason to need this commission. If it were another situation, Noah wouldn't mind giving this commission to them, not for the sake of the arrogant Mira and the timid Elfman, but for the sake of the cute little girl Lisanna, who was reasonable. Noah didn't mind giving this commission to them. However, this was Noah's first real job. If he encountered a setback in his first job and had to give up on the mission, Noah would inevitably feel disappointed and even lose confidence in himself. Not to mention, he didn't encounter any setbacks that forced him to give up on the mission. It was just a few people who came out and said that they wanted to steal his job. Not to mention, they had that kind of attitude. Looking back, Noah confirmed that Mira, Elfman, and Lisanna hadn't caught up with him. He carried his strip-shaped bag and walked into the forest. The forest at night was very dangerous. In the more than a year in Magnolia, Noah ran into the forest almost every day to train his control of mana and swordsmanship. Therefore, Noah knew very well how dangerous the forest at night was. Other things aside, many of the truly dangerous magical creatures were frequently active at night in search of prey. Coupled with the restrictions of terrain and vision, the forest at night was often very advantageous to magical creatures. On the contrary, it was very disadvantageous to humans. Fortunately, this forest wasn't full of magical creatures like the forest in Magnolia. At most, there were some ferocious beasts. There was a chance of magical creatures appearing. However, the monsters in this type of forest were usually outsiders. Their numbers were pitifully small, and their strength was uneven. After all, powerful magical creatures were generally able to occupy a place where they lived, and some even occupied an entire territory. Only the weak magical creatures would be chased out of their habitat or escape in search of other places. Under such circumstances, this forest wasn't considered dangerous. Even the villagers of a small village often came here to hunt. Noah believed that he could handle such a forest at night. Currently, it was summer in the Fiori Kingdom. However, the temperature in the forest was quite chilly. It was hard to believe that it was summer. At night, the atmosphere in the forest was different from during the day. It was as if there was an additional cold air that made one's hair stand on end. As Noah walked into the depths of the forest, he breathed in the gloomy and cold air. A sense of nostalgia inexplicably rose in his heart. No, it wasn't strange at all. Because Noah used to visit the forest at night in Magnolia. The forest in front of him seemed to be connected to the scene in his memory, which made Noah feel nostalgic. However, compared to the forest in Magnolia, which was full of magical creatures, this forest was undoubtedly much more reassuring. For example, there wouldn't be the pungent smell of magical creatures here. For example, there wouldn't be insects larger than a human falling from the trees here. For example, there wouldn't be strange birds chirping here. For example, there wouldn't be spiders the size of a fist running around here. At most, there would be snakes crawling on the road, or owls with glowing eyes hiding in the trees. Thinking about these strange things and comparing the forest in Magnolia to the forest here, Noah unknowingly began to walk around aimlessly. It couldn't be helped. The village chief said that there would be spirits crying in this forest from time to time, but he didn't say exactly where to hear these cries. This wasn't strange. After all, Noah told the village chief that he would only carry out the mission tomorrow. If that was the case, the village chief would have explained in detail before he set off tomorrow. Thinking about this, Noah was a little annoyed. If he had known this would happen, he would have gone to the village chief's house first. Woo woo woo, just as Noah was immersed in his own annoyance and was about to sigh, a crying sound came from the surroundings, which made Noah freeze on the spot. Woo woo woo, before Noah could fully react, the crying sound became clearer and clearer, which woke Noah up from his stupor. At this time, Noah noticed two details. First, the crying sound was very young. The owner of the crying sound was definitely not more than 10 years old, and it was a female voice. Second, in addition to the crying sound gradually approaching Noah's direction, there was also a faint sound of footsteps coming from the depths of the forest. It should be the footsteps of the owner of the crying sound. It wasn't hard to imagine that the other party was crying while walking. Footsteps. Noah tilted his head in puzzlement. Isn't it a spirit? Do spirits need to walk and make footsteps? With such doubts in his mind, Noah carried the long cloth bag and leaped, silently hiding in the trees to the side. His gaze was cast forward, looking in the direction of the crying and footsteps. After an unknown amount of time, a very small figure slowly walked over from the depths of the forest, imprinted in Noah's eyes. It was a little girl. She was about 7 or 8 years old, 4 or 5 years younger than Noah. The little girl had a head of dark blue short hair that was unusually eye-catching even in the dark night. She wore an extremely thin shirt, and it was definitely very cold in the forest at night. However, the little girl was completely unaware of it, and didn't see her body shivering from the cold. Instead, she lowered her head and rubbed her eyes, crying non-stop as she walked over. "Woo woo woo. Granddany. Where are you? It's so dark here. I'm so scared." Listening to the heart-wrenching cries and watching the little child walking towards them while crying, Noah was really confused. Was this a spirit? She didn't look like one at all, did she? Could it be that the crying in the forest was actually this child, and not some spirit? Didn't that mean that this child had been crying in the forest all this time? Noah fell silent, and after a while, he walked outside. The little girl seemed to have noticed the strange sounds around her. Her crying stopped abruptly, and she wiped the tears off her face. She looked around in panic, and then hurriedly hid in the bushes at the side. Seeing this, Noah was basically certain. Whether or not this little girl was the so-called spirit, she must have stayed in the forest for quite some time. Otherwise, why would a normal child hide when they heard the strange sounds? The child in front of him must have known that there were all sorts of ferocious beasts in the forest, and that it would be very dangerous to encounter them. That was why she hid when she heard the strange sounds. Chapter 30. At this time, Noah had somewhat forgotten his original intention of coming here. He came to the bush where the little girl was hiding, squatted down, and gently parted the bush in front of him. In the next moment, the figure of a blue-haired little girl, hugging her knees and curling up into a ball, looking at Noah with a frightened expression, once again entered Noah's field of vision. Looking at Noah's face that suddenly appeared in front of her, the blue-haired little girl crawled back in horror, her face full of fear. "Don't be afraid, I'm not a beast, nor am I a magical creature. I have no malice towards you." Noah tried to soften his tone as much as possible, with a gentle smile on his face, and extended his hand towards the blue-haired little girl. Come over here." Looking at the face in front of her that was filled with a gentle smile, the fear in the blue-haired little girl's heart was incredibly reduced by more than half. Her pale face also regained some color, but she still stared at Noah's hand that was stretched out in front of her with a fearful expression, her petite body trembling slightly. Noah didn't rush the other party, but maintained the appearance of extending his hand with a smile, waiting for the blue-haired little girl to react. He didn't show the slightest bit of impatience, allowing time to gradually pass. The blue-haired little girl secretly observed Noah like this, and seemed to have determined that the other party wouldn't hurt her. She timidly extended her little hand, trembling, and placed it on Noah's extended hand. At the moment of contact, Noah and the blue-haired little girl both had different feelings. Noah felt that the little hand in the center of his palm was really too cold, so cold that it seemed to have lost the temperature that a human body should have, which made Noah very surprised. The blue-haired little girl had a completely opposite feeling, only feeling that the palm that embraced her little hand was really too warm, so warm that the blue-haired little girl couldn't help but have a trace of nostalgia. As a result, the blue-haired little girl's hand tightened uncontrollably, as if she was grabbing onto a life-saving straw. She held on to Noah's hand tightly. Under the night sky, in the forest, two children of different ages, one young and one old, held each other's hands tightly. In the absence of witnesses, they formed a bond that no one knew but was difficult to break. Late at night, in a quiet corner of the forest, a wisp of smoke floated into the sky. Carried by the wind, it drifted into an unknown distance. The blazing red bonfire emitted light and heat that dispelled the darkness and gloomy coldness. The game roasted beside the bonfire also emitted a fragrance that made one's stomach tighten. Beside the bonfire, the blue-haired little girl sat there, wolfing down the freshly roasted meat in her hand. Her little cheeks had already puffed up due to the excessive amount of food stuffed into her mouth. Along with her owners chewing, she moved little by little, looking extremely adorable. Obviously, the blue-haired little girl hadn't seriously eaten a full meal for a very long time. After coming to this conclusion, Noah also allowed the little girl to continue eating in a way that would make people feel cute while he sat quietly on the side, roasting the rest of the freshly hunted game while observing the blue-haired little girl. The blue-haired little girl's name was Wendy Mabel. This was also something that Noah just found out. It was believed that no one would think that such a child would be a spirit. The same went for Noah. Therefore, seeing Wendy eating heartily, Noah was also happy to continue observing Wendy. In the end, he still couldn't see any signs of a spirit from this cute little girl in front of him. Unknowingly, time passed quietly. Although it was obvious that she hadn't eaten a full meal for a long time, Wendy was still a child after all. Moreover, she was still a girl. Her appetite wouldn't be that big. After finishing the small game in her hand, she seemed to be full. Holding her small hands, Wendy secretly sized up Noah. After a long time, she mustered up the courage to speak with a voice as soft as a mosquito. Thank you, are you full?" Noah shook his head and waved the roasted game in his hand. "Do you need a little more?" "No. No need." Noah shrugged indifferently and stuck the roasted game in his hand beside the bonfire, then looked at Wendy. "Then, Wendy, can I call you this?" Wendy nodded her head, and then emphasized again. "I'll call you Big Brother Noah, can I?" "If you don't mind," Noah scratched his cheek and asked. "Then, Wendy, why are you here? Why are you crying so sadly?" I've always lived here." Wendy's small face showed a sad expression, and her watery eyes began to moisten. I can't find my mother, I can't find Grandine. Can't find your mother." Noah sighed. "In other words, you're lost, right?" "No." Wendy shook her head and said. "I remember the way home, but Grandine is no longer there. Grandine suddenly disappeared and doesn't want me anymore." As she spoke, Wendy's moist eyes became misty. Drops of tears flowed out, and she began to sob. Even though Noah was usually able to control his emotions, he had never encountered a girl crying like this before. He was at a loss for what to do. He could only sit beside Wendy and pat her back, comforting her as if he was coaxing a child. "Wendy, don't cry. Tell me what your mother looks like. I'll help you find her, okay?" However, in the next moment, Wendy sobbed and said something that shocked Noah. "Grandine is a dragon, a very, very gentle dragon." Dragon. Of course, no one knew of such an existence. Wendy's mother was a dragon. Wasn't that the same as Naz, who was raised by a dragon? "You." At that moment, Noah said to Wendy in astonishment. "You're also a dragon slayer archmage?" "Also." This time, it was Wendy's turn to look at Noah with a tear-stained face, letting Noah understand. The little girl in front of him who was 4 or 5 years younger than him was most likely the second dragon slayer archmage other than Naz. It was also very likely that she had also learned the ancient lost magic that was used to fight against dragons, dragon slayer magic. Since when did such a powerful magic become so worthless? Noah only had time to feel this way in his heart. In the next second, a sudden phenomenon interrupted his thoughts. Rumble. In the sky, a deafening sound of thunder suddenly resounded. "Ah!" The timid Wendy let out a scream and threw herself into Noah's arms without hesitation. Noah only hugged the slender and soft body in his arms reflexively. He raised his head and looked at the sky. Then, his pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. Rumble. Amidst the thunderous roar, the clouds in the sky that were shrouded in darkness suddenly rolled up. It was as if there was a whirlpool in the middle, constantly sucking in the surrounding clouds and gradually rotating. Gradually, the entire sky of the forest was replaced by a huge vortex of black clouds. The center of the vortex was faintly emitting light and emitting a shocking roar. This scene was as if there was a hole in the sky. A hole in the sky. Tightly holding Wendy in his arms, Noah's face was full of uncertainty as he stared at the vortex-like sky. Could it be that this is the curse-like phenomenon that was summoned by the cries of ghosts that the village chief mentioned? Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but look at Wendy, who was shivering in his arms with a face full of fear. It seemed that Wendy didn't know what was going on with this strange phenomenon. Moreover, at the beginning, Wendy was also crying, but at that time, she didn't summon any strange phenomenon. Therefore, this strange phenomenon was definitely not caused by Wendy, at least not on purpose. At this time, the strange phenomenon in the sky changed again. Chapter 31. The whirlpool-like sky suddenly came to a standstill without any prelude. Even the center of the whirlpool was directly fixed there, and the light inside gradually dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing this scene, Noah, who was just thinking about whether to leave or not, was stunned on the spot. Who? Under Noah's gaze, in the sky, a gust of wind blew from the huge whirlpool, as if it was higher than the sky. To be more precise, it should be said that it was blowing down from above the clouds, stirring up the whirlpool-like pitch-black clouds. Looking at this scene in a daze, and at the entire irregular sky that was stirred up into a mess, Noah was at a loss. Although, in order to be able to adapt to life as soon as possible, when he was just adopted by Makarov, Noah also worked very hard to learn the culture and knowledge of this world. Not only did he learn all the words in a short 2 to 3 months, he also learned a lot of knowledge related to the magic world. But such a development had long exceeded Noah's scope of understanding. It was no wonder that Noah was at a loss. However, the loss only lasted for a short period of time. After a while, Noah noticed. The whirlpool-like wind that stirred up the whirlpool-like sky seemed to be blowing down from a place higher than the clouds, but under Noah's outstanding sensing ability, the real driving force of this whirlpool-like wind was nowhere to be hidden. In Noah's sensing, the power that stirred up the whirlpool-like sky into a mess was a surge of magic that rose from the ground. Obviously, this was a man-made situation. Moreover, the location of the magic was not elsewhere, but in this forest, not far from Noah's location in the depths of the forest. Aware of this, Noah directly cast his gaze towards the place where the magic soared into the sky, and his eyes began to flicker. Should I go and take a look? Brother Noah. Wendy, who was in Noah's arms, seemed to have recovered from her fear. She pulled on Noah's clothes, and her big watery eyes stared straight at Noah's face, while her finger pointed to the sky. The sky, the atmosphere, everyone has become so strange, so chaotic. Hearing this, Noah lowered his head in surprise and met Wendy's gaze. You can feel the state of the sky and atmosphere. Yes. Wendy nodded without hiding anything. I am the sky's dragon-slaying sorcerer. Noah was relieved. The dragon slayer magic was a powerful magic that transformed the user's physique into that of a dragon and was used to fight against and kill dragons. However, the dragon slayer magic wasn't just a single type of magic. Instead, it was like the entire magic system, having an entire series of spells. For example, Naz was a fire dragon slayer archmage and used the fire dragon slayer magic. His entire person was like a fire dragon. Not only did he have super destructive power, he could also recover his mana and stamina by devouring flames. Wendy was the archmage of the sky's dragon slayer, so she was undoubtedly using the sky's dragon slayer magic. Therefore, it wasn't strange for Wendy to be able to sense the state of the sky and atmosphere. Looking up, Noah looked at the whirlpool that had completely disappeared and the sky that was gradually returning to its original calm state. Then, he looked at the source of magic that was gradually converging in the depths of the forest. After pondering for a moment, he stood up. "Wendy," Noah said as he put Wendy down and pointed at the source of magic that was almost disappearing. "I plan to go over there and take a look." "I'll go with you," Wendy said without hesitation and tightly grabbed Noah's corner, looking like she was about to cry. "Brother Noah, don't leave me alone." Okay. Noah could only smile bitterly and compromise, holding Wendy's hand. "Don't worry, I won't leave you alone." "Yes." Wendy smiled through her tears. Holding Wendy's hand and following his own senses, Noah tried to reduce the sound of his footsteps as much as possible and slowly walked towards the source of the whirlpool of magic that had completely disappeared. The surrounding darkness blocked most of Noah and Wendy's vision, and the surrounding trees and bushes were filled with the low roars of beasts. However, Noah was unwavering as he walked towards the source of the magic, while Wendy hid behind Noah, her face full of fear. Not long after, the two of them arrived at a vast open space. The magic that had stirred up the whirlpool in the sky was released from here. Now, that magic had already disappeared. But Noah could clearly feel that in this open space, the existence of the same origin as that magic was still there, and it didn't disappear just like that. And in the center of that vast open space, there seemed to be a figure that was about the same size as Noah standing there, with its back facing Noah and Wendy. Wendy hid her small body behind Noah's back, only sticking out her head. Her small hand that was grabbing Noah's clothes and hand was getting tighter and tighter, as if she was nervous. Noah fully displayed his ability to control his emotions. The more he felt at this moment, the calmer he became. Holding Wendy's hand, he walked into the open space. Only after entering the open space, did Noah see the back of the figure in the center of the open space. That was indeed the back of a figure that was about the same size as Noah. Moreover, the other party also had a head of dark blue short hair that was not much different from Wendy's. But from the other party's back, the other party should be a boy. From this boy, Noah felt the magic that he had just sensed. Needless to say, the magic that was stirring up the whirlpool-like sky was the doing of this person in front of him. Brother Noah. Wendy, who was hiding behind Noah, was very nervous and scared as she pulled Noah's hand. Noah stopped in his tracks and didn't turn back to look at Wendy. Instead, he stared at the back of the figure in front of him and said in a deep voice, "Who are you?" The figure with its back facing Noah and Wendy gently raised its head and turned around, exposing its face in front of Noah and Wendy. Looking at the face that was exposed in front of them, Noah was speechless for a moment, and Wendy's whole body trembled, showing even more fear. Because, on the right side of the other party's face, there was a sinister tattoo that extended from the eye socket to the cheek, just like the eye of a devil. If this scene was seen in the daytime, it would be fine, but now, under the influence of the night and the atmosphere, this tattoo looked a little gloomy, and made people feel very uncomfortable. Noah subconsciously protected Wendy behind him, and his other hand was already holding the strip-shaped cloth bag tightly, and his voice was a little cold. "Who are you?" The second time he asked, he still didn't get any response. However, Noah and Wendy were both stunned. Bang! The young man with the tattoo on his face suddenly went limp and fell to the ground, and didn't move at all. "Aw!" Wendy let out a small cry of surprise, and even Noah frowned. The scene suddenly became a somewhat strange silence. "Brother Noah." Wendy poked her head out from behind Noah, and her young voice was full of confusion. "That person, is he not feeling well?" "It's because I don't know if he is or not that big brother is a little troubled." Noah's face hung a helpless smile. "I'll go take a look, Wendy," you wait here for a moment. Wendy hesitated, but she knew that Noah was doing this to protect her. Although she was very unwilling, she nodded obediently, let go of Noah, and ran to the side to hide behind a tree trunk. Noah then walked in the direction of the young man on the ground, and came to the other party's side, squatted down, stretched out his hand, and looked at the other party's condition. The young man on the ground was a little short of breath, and his face didn't look very good, and even looked like he was in slight pain, but his eyelids didn't tremble. This kind of state allowed Noah to easily determine what happened. Magic overused, so that's why he fainted, right? Noah pondered for a moment, and then seemed to have made a decision, and helped the other party up. Wendy, you live here, so you should know where there are caves and such, right? Wendy was stunned. Chapter 32. The next day, warm sunlight sprinkled down from the sky, driving away the gloomy coldness lingering in the forest. Finally, there was some summer heat under the sky. A young boy with a tattoo on his face woke up from his sleep and slowly opened his eyes. Just as he opened his eyes, the young boy heard a very cute, yet very young, little cry of surprise. Big brother Noah, that person woke up. Who? The thorny young man abruptly opened his half-opened eyes. His body sat up like a loose spring. His face was full of vigilance as he looked around. The thorny teenager found himself in a cave of unknown origin. The cave wasn't very big, smaller than the room of an ordinary family. The young boy could clearly see the fierce sunlight outside the cave and the surrounding walls of the cave. As for himself, he was lying on a protruding platform under the innermost wall of the cave. As for the entrance of the cave, the young boy saw two people. One of them was a boy of 11 or 12 years of age with short black hair and eyes as deep as the stars. In front of him was a long cloth bag that seemed to contain some kind of weapon leaning on one of his shoulders. His whole body was emitting an extraordinary aura. The other was hiding beside the young boy. She poked her head out from the side of the young boy and looked at him with eyes full of doubt, curiosity, and a trace of fear. She was about 7 or 8 years old. At this time, the young boy was sitting on the ground at the entrance of the cave with his back against the wall. He stretched out a hand and stroked the head of the little girl who was hiding beside him. At the same time, he turned his head to look at the young boy with a slight smile on his face. "You're awake." The young boy didn't immediately respond, but the vigilance in his eyes lessened. After a moment of silence, he spoke softly. "You are Noah Dole from Fairy Tale. You can call me Noah." Noah briefly introduced himself and patted the head of the blue-haired little girl beside him. "She is Wendy." "Hi." "Hello," Wendy said in a timid manner. Then she didn't say anything else. Fairy Tale. The spiky young man's eyes flickered a few times. He lowered his head and hesitated for a moment before introducing himself. "My name is Jalal. Did you save me?" "I'm not the one who saved you." Noah shrugged and continued to pat Wendy's head. "The one who saved you was Wendy. She was the one who used healing magic to help you recover." To be honest, even I was a little surprised. This was the truth. After all, the power of Naz's Dragon Slayer magic was really extraordinary. Even though Naz was still young and hadn't displayed its true power, its power was still so great that even ordinary magic shooters could only look up to it. However, the Dragon Slayer magic was a magic used to fight against dragons, so it was not surprising that it had this kind of power. The one last night should be the last time it was triggered. After this, anima won't be triggered here again. As for the crying ghost, I don't know. I have solved the crying ghost. Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he glanced at Wendy, who had a confused look on her face beside him. It is indeed a crying ghost, and it is quite cute. Now, Noah finally understood the whole story. If he wasn't wrong, the crying ghost that the village chief mentioned was only the cry that Wendy made when she was looking for Grandine in the forest. As for why the sky would be cursed and split apart when the specter cried, that was purely because of the super-secondary space magic, anima, which no one knew what it was. In other words, Wendy's crying and the activation of anima happened to coincide, which caused the villagers hunting in the forest to panic, leading to the incident of the crying ghost cursing the sky. Everything was caused by a coincidence and a misunderstanding. This made Noah couldn't help but find it funny, and he couldn't help but feel a myriad of emotions. Sure enough, ghosts and whatnot didn't exist. Wendy, who didn't know, had a head full of question marks. Jalal, on the other hand, seemed to understand, and he also smiled helplessly. Since the truth has been revealed, and there won't be any more crying ghosts or anima in the future, my commission can be considered completed. The rest is none of my business, and I won't ask again. Noah stood up and skillfully reached out his hand to hold Wendy's hand, which was about to reach out in a hurry. Now I'm going back to the village, do you want to come with me? Jalal looked at Noah gratefully, nodded, and stood up. The three of them walked out of the cave together, and walked out of the forest. Chapter 33. The moderate temperature of the sun shone on the neither too large nor too small village. It also shone on the courtyard of an old hotel, covering a man and a woman in the courtyard with a layer of golden gauze. Ha! 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 Along with the loud and clear shouts, Noah held the knight's sword in his hand and slashed with the standard posture that he had practiced diligently for 3 months. Every slash created a flash of sword light and a sharp piercing sound in front of him, giving off a pleasing feeling to the eyes. Not far away, Wendy sat on the doorstep, her small hand supporting her cheeks. Her big watery eyes were fixed on Noah, who was waving his sword in the courtyard. She had a satisfied expression on her face, and her eyes never left Noah. This was the 3rd day after Noah, Wendy, and Jalal returned from the forest. On the first day back, Noah went to the village chief's house and told him that he had completed the mission. He asked the village chief to tell the villagers to go back to the forest to hunt as usual. The village chief naturally thanked Noah for his words, and tactfully asked Noah to stay in the village for a few days. When the villagers who went into the forest confirmed that there were no more weeping ghosts and broken skies in the forest, they would pay him for completing the mission. This was a matter of course. Noah did not think that he could gain the village chief's trust with just a few words, so he took Wendy and stayed in the village's hotel. As for Jalal, Noah originally thought that he would leave directly, but in the end, Jalal also stayed and temporarily stayed in the village. Although according to my inference, anima should not be activated in this area anymore, but to be safe, it's better to stay and observe for a while. Just like this, Noah, Wendy, and Jalal stayed in the village together, and also stayed in the hotel. It was worth mentioning that although the 3 of them stayed in the same hotel in the village, they only stayed in 2 rooms. Noah was the first person that Wendy met in her life. Now, Wendy's mother, Grandine, had suddenly disappeared. Wendy had bitterly searched for her in the forest for several days, crying for several days. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was for a little girl who was less than 10 years old and didn't know how to deal with worldly affairs. Perhaps because of this, as the first person that Wendy met and the first person who gave her warmth, Noah seemed to have a very high position in Wendy's heart in just 3 days. In addition, Wendy's only family member was missing, so in these 3 days, Wendy basically did not leave Noah for a moment. She even had to sleep in the same room and bed as Noah, otherwise she would have a sad expression as if she wanted to cry. She was completely attached to Noah. Unable to do anything, Noah could only let Wendy do as she pleased. Ha 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 ha. Rhythmic shouts sounded continuously, and the cold gleam of the blade flickered continuously in the courtyard. In these 3 days, Noah basically used all of his time to train his sword skills and control of mana. Compared to Magnolia, there were not many changes apart from the different location and the absence of Alusha as a sparring partner. Even outside, Noah did not forget to train himself. That was the only battle ability that he had at the moment. On the other hand, Wendy, who had been watching Noah practice his swordsmanship, caught a glimpse of someone approaching. After being stunned for a moment, she stood up and called out to Noah in a delicate voice. "Big brother Noah. Jalal is back." The knight's sword in Noah's hand that had just swung down paused in midair, and did not follow the momentum of the attack. From this, it could be seen that Noah's sword skills had improved by leaps and bounds. Even Alusha would praise him if she saw this scene. Big brother Noah. It was unknown when Wendy had run to Noah's side. She held a towel in her hand and handed it to Noah. "Thank you." Noah took the towel, wiped his sweat, and patted Wendy's head. When Wendy showed a comfortable expression, he turned his head and looked at Jalal, who was walking over. "How is it?" "It's still stable." Jalal nodded. "There are no signs of anima continuing to activate in this place. I think it's safe here." Hearing this, Noah nodded. Even though they had been together for 3 days, Jalal still didn't show any signs of telling Noah about the super subspace magic anima. Therefore, Noah didn't know anything about anima either. However, from Jalal's words of, "It's safe here," it could be inferred that if anima was successfully activated, it would definitely lead to a disaster not inferior to Noah's mana rampage. It was to prevent this disaster that Jalal appeared here. According to Jalal, he would continue to wander around the world, searching for the traces of anima, embarking on the journey of constantly closing anima that was about to be activated. Knowing this, Noah cast his gaze on Jalal. "Are you planning to leave?" Jalal opened his mouth and was about to say something, but a voice interrupted him. A guest from fairy tale. The newcomer was none other than the owner of the hotel, who had walked in from outside and stood in front of Noah. Noah looked at the owner of the hotel, looking at his hesitant look, frowned slightly, and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "The village chief asked me to bring a message to you," the owner of the hotel shook his head and said. "Not long ago, there were 3 white-haired children about your age who went to the village chief to ask about your whereabouts. Then they went into the forest and have not returned since. The village chief asked me to ask you, are those 3 your companions?" 3 white-haired children. Wendy and Jalal both looked at Noah at the same time, so they also clearly saw the sudden change in Noah's expression. "What's wrong?" Jalal asked. "Are they people you know?" "Kind of." Noah's expression was not good, and he asked the owner of the hotel. "You're saying that the 3 of them never came back after they entered the forest?" "No, they just never came back," the owner of the hotel answered honestly. The villagers only saw the 3 people enter the forest, but they never saw them come out. Noah was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I understand, please thank the village chief for me." The owner of the hotel nodded with a smile and left. "Brother Noah." Wendy suddenly felt a little uneasy, and tightly held the silent Noah's hand, not letting go. "Noah?" Jalal asked. "Do you need help?" Noah's expression changed a few times, and he finally sighed and pulled Wendy in front of him. "If you want to help me, could you please take Wendy to Grandini?" "Take Wendy to Grandini?" Jalal was a little surprised. "I don't want to." Wendy's little face turned pale, and she suddenly hugged Noah's leg. "I don't want to leave brother Noah." Noah seemed to have expected things to turn out this way. He smiled helplessly, and squatted down to pull Wendy in front of him again. "Wendy, be good, and let Jalal take you to Grandini, okay?" "I don't want to." Wendy threw herself into Noah's arms again, and hugged Noah tightly, as if she would rather die than let go. "Brother Noah, don't be like Grandine and leave me alone." Hearing Wendy's words and feeling how hard Wendy was hugging him with her tiny arms, Noah was shocked. Although Noah liked Wendy, who was like a little sister to him, he really didn't expect her to be so attached to him. Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but feel a little troubled. He stroked Wendy's thin back and said softly, "I don't want to separate from Grandine." "I don't want to be separated from Wendy either, but don't you want to look for Grandine?" Wendy trembled. "You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.